Chapter 223. Li Yuanchu suddenly fell like Mount Tai. At that moment there was already an immortal sword in his hand. The immortal sword also had a black and white Buddhist light. This change was indeed not what Sumo had expected. He really did not sense Li Yuanchu appear from above. The concealment of the deity's tribulation aura was really not something Sumo could compare with. At this time, Sumo wanted to dodge, but it was too late. Originally, the broken bamboo pole was above Sumo's head. However, Li Yuanchu's immortal sword directly pierced through the bamboo pole's defense. After all, the bamboo pole was not a defensive magic weapon. It was only temporarily used by Sumo in the air. At this moment, there was only a head-on collision. Sumo could not dodge. Looking again, Sumo raised the ancient secular fan in his hand and directly covered his head. The ancient secular fan was also not a defensive magic weapon, but at this time, Sumo had nothing else to use. He hoped to block Li Yuanchu's sword of tribulation. Chi boom! Li Yuanchu's sword hit the ancient secular fan. The power of the tribulation, the immortal sword of tribulation. The power of the tribulation was enough to kill Sumo. Fortunately, the ancient secular fan suddenly lit up with endless red light. The red light filled the sky with a mysterious aura. Previously, even the red-dressed Mu Jinghong had to retreat from the ancient secular fan. Li Yuanchu's heart shook again. At the same time, he directly turned back, dispelling the power of the ancient secular fan. Why did Sumo have so many strange treasures on her body? But how could the power of the tribulation be underestimated? Li Yuanchu's attack was absolutely with all his strength. He originally wanted to take Sumo's life. If not for the ancient secular fan, Sumo would undoubtedly die. Even so, Sumo felt the power of the tribulation surging like a wave, simply unstoppable. Even if it was just the aftermath. Boom! Sumo flew out directly. However, Sumo did not fly out voluntarily, but was thrown out by the force. Wah, wah! Sumo flew several thousand feet away. At that moment, Sumo felt her dantian churn. Unable to control herself, she spat out 2 mouthfuls of blood. It had been a long time since Sumo suffered such an injury. At the same time, Sumo felt as if there were endless electric arcs scurrying all over her body, and ants biting her, making her feel extremely numb. The power of the divine tribulation lingered in the air. Sumo spat out 2 mouthfuls of blood, but her body was still numb, and she couldn't move immediately. When experts exchanged blows, it only took an instant. Although the red dust fan automatically emitted a red glow, it only reduced a portion of Li Yuanchu's divine tribulation power. Li Yuanchu himself did not suffer much damage. Therefore, Li Yuanchu's body suddenly turned in the air and once again rushed towards Sumo. Sumo's mind moved. The 9 skeletons immediately flew up and blocked in front of Sumo. However, Li Yuanchu's speed was too fast. Before the 9 skeletons could completely block in front of Sumo, Li Yuanchu's sword light had already arrived. This was because Li Yuanchu was indeed worried about the skeletons. The power that originated from Silent Death Valley prevented him from fully unleashing the power of the divine tribulation. Therefore, Li Yuanchu increased his speed to the extreme. He wanted to end this quickly. A white light, faster than lightning. When the 9 skeletons were flying towards Sumo, the white light was already 1 step ahead. Sumo raised her eyebrows. The power of the divine tribulation was bone-chilling. At that moment, Sumo really felt the threat of death. At this time, most of the people present could no longer see the battle between Sumo and Li Yuanchu. Li Yuanchu's sword light attacked, but Sumo still couldn't move. Ling Hu Huan, on the other hand, could see everything clearly, but there was nothing he could do. At that crucial moment, Sumo felt an extremely gentle force behind her, instantly supporting her. Then, Sumo was dragged along, and he suddenly retreated. Boom! At the same time, a Buddhist bead flew out of the void. The Buddhist bead was the size of a walnut, and its entire body glowed with reddish-brown light. It tore through the air, and even had a 3-foot-long tail. Sumo retreated, while the Buddhist bead moved forward. Crack! The Buddhist bead directly blocked the tip of Li Yuanchu's sword. The two divine tribulation powers collided, and suddenly a shockwave spread out layer by layer, sweeping the sky at the same time. This was a true divine tribulation showdown. In fact, it was even more intense than the clash between Guan Xiong and Li Yuanyi. At this time, Guan Xiong and Li Yuanyi were in a state of constant fighting. This was because Guan Xiong knew that if he didn't use that method, he wouldn't be Li Yuanyi's match. Sumo was a good example. If they really fought head-on, it wouldn't work. At this time, a figure in gray had already blocked in front of Li Yuanchu. He was dressed in a gray robe, and he was tall and thin, looking slightly frail. It was none other than Master Mute. In his hand, he was holding a string of Buddhist beads. There should be 108 Buddhist beads, but at this time, only one was missing. Just now, Master Mute took out a Buddhist bead, but it was a few times bigger. Whoosh! Master Mute waved one hand, and a reddish-brown light flew back and landed directly on his Buddhist bead. Master Mute straightened one palm and looked coldly at Li Yuanchu. Li Yuanchu put away the immortal sword in his hand, then actually bowed to Master Mute. "Master Mute, are you really going to fight?" Master Mute looked at Li Yuanchu and slowly nodded. Sigh. Li Yuanchu let out a long sigh. However, at this time, no one could tell whether his sigh was real or fake. "We've been friends for tens of thousands of years. I really regret it." Master Mute shook his head and smiled faintly. Because, in his view, there was nothing in the entire Pure Land that could be regretted. If one had crossed the ocean, how could one be water? Master Mute had already experienced too much pain in the reincarnation cycle. At this moment, the Mute Master did not speak, but the string of Buddhist beads in his hand had begun to shine. Li Yuanchu's eyes narrowed as he stared at the string of prayer beads. They had known each other for tens of thousands of years and lived together for 10,000 years. Not long after the death of Xinglun, Mute came to Wanhuang Temple and never left. In 10,000 years, Li Yuanchu had yet to comprehend the Mute Warrior. Because the Mute Warrior never spoke. However, Li Yuanchu understood that it was impossible for a great cultivator of the deity tribulation realm to be a mute. The Mute Master just didn't want to talk. Li Yuanchu had never seen that string of prayer beads before. Just now, a prayer bead had blocked his divine tribulation flying sword. How could it be a mortal object? Thus, Li Yuanchu did not dare to take the risk at this moment. In his opinion, the Mute Warrior was his strongest opponent. Li Yuanchu first looked at the other group's battle. The battle between Li Yuanyi and Guan Xiong was not very intense. That was because Li Yuanyi had never used his full strength. As twin brothers, Li Yuanyi and Li Yuanchu shared the same spirit. Since the Mute Warrior was going to make a move, they had no choice but to use their ultimate means. That was their trump card. Whoosh, whoosh. Looking again, Li Yuanyi suddenly cast two spells with the goal of forcing Guan Xiong to retreat. As expected, Guan Xiong retreated. Li Yuanyi and Li Yuanchu flew towards the top of the Bitter Soul Pagoda at the same time. One black and one white, the two brothers stood at the top of the pagoda like a mirror image. Chapter 224. Black and white opposed each other, merging. Li Yuanchu and Li Yuanyi slowly merged into one. But the merging of the two was very interesting. Because they each occupied one side. The merged person could not be called Li Yuanchu, nor could he be called Li Yuanyi. Half black and half white, as if half of the person and his own shadow were stuck together. But the merged person's cultivation level was rising. Late-stage deity tribulation. Guan Xiong's expression changed. Because the black and white person's aura made Guan Xiong feel suppressed. Seeing this, the Mute Master also frowned. At this time, in terms of cultivation level, Li Yuanchu and Li Yuanyi's merged person was above him. Actually, this was the scene the Mute Master did not want to see the most. But it was not because the Mute Master was powerless, but because he knew what Li Yuanchu and Li Yuanyi were going to do. Until the last moment, the Mute Master did not want to use his trump card. At that moment, the Mute Master's eyes flashed with pity. He was not pitying Li Yuanchu and Li Yuanyi, but the beings of the White Bone Continent. He chanted in his heart, Amit Ba, good, good. At this time, all the cultivators present held their breaths, watching this strange scene. Most of them could not see Li Yuanchu and Li Yuanyi's cultivation level. They could only feel a terrifying aura. Right now, they could only be spectators who had no choice. In front of the strong, the weak were so pitiful. Their life and death were completely out of their control. Everyone, I did not want to do this, but you forced me. That was Li Yuanchu's voice, filled with sadness and helplessness. If one did not know, they would really think they were the victims. At the top of the Bitter Soul Tower, the black and white person's clothes fluttered in the wind. Two long eyebrows, one black and one white, like a ghostly long beard. Looking again, layers of black energy rolled up from the bottom of the Bitter Soul Tower, like coiling dragons, rising up. In an instant, they wrapped around the entire Bitter Soul Tower. Rumble. The Bitter Soul Tower slowly rose, this time leaving the White Bone Continent, completely hanging in the air. Howl, jie. At that moment, ghostly wails and wolf howls sounded again. Those who sleep will eventually awaken, those who do not die will definitely be reborn. Li Yuanchu's voice sounded again. The voice reverberated like a Sanskrit song, but it also sounded like an endless oracle. Ma and I pad me? Forgive? Li Yuanchu put his palms together, still in the posture of a monk. As he chanted the incantation, the Bitter Soul Pagoda shrunk rapidly until it turned into a 3-inch tall black pagoda. After that, it hid itself between the brows of the fused man. Whoosh, whoosh, the realm of the body integration stage rose again. Deity Tribulation Great Circle. A terrifying aura instantly enveloped everything. That aura was like the wind, sweeping through everything in its path. Boom boom. Hua, the entire temple of 10,000 desolation instantly turned into ruins. Regardless of whether it was the front yard or the backyard, everything collapsed at that moment and turned into ashes. 100,000 years of foundation was destroyed in a day. At this moment, it wasn't just the 10,000-year-old temple that was like this. Some of the cultivators with lower cultivation levels, who were watching the battle, were also directly annihilated. Mute Shi, Guanxiong, Sumo, Linghu He Huan and the others tried their best to protect everyone, but it was not enough. At this moment, cultivators below the nascent soul realm had already lost the ability to protect themselves. At this moment, Sumo could already move. He quickly formed a hand seal. Among his 9 skeletons, other than one that was guarding him, the others stood in 8 different directions like door guardians. Then, he slapped his storage pouch and 8 colorful flags flew out. The flags were of 8 different colors, each different from the other. These array flags were left to him by his 6th senior brother, Lu Tianzhan. The 8 colorful flags were all advanced nascent soul realm magic treasures. Although they couldn't fight against the deity's tribulation cultivators, Sumo could use them to set up arrays. 8 skeletons, 8 colorful flags. Sumo's array was inherited from his 7th senior sister. No one in the White Bone realm could match it. Whoosh, 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 the colorful flags fluttered in the wind and the skeletons scattered light. In an instant, the light intertwined and formed a large array. Then, it protected everyone in the center. Although the deity's tribulation aura was powerful, it couldn't break through Sumo's array. Because it was equivalent to setting up a small silent death valley. It was just that the others didn't know about it. After this battle, Sumo's name would spread far and wide. However, at this moment, the Li brothers' goal wasn't to kill the person in front of them. Instead, they wanted to summon the entire White Bone Continent. At this moment, the entire immortal temple was razed to the ground. Millions of black gas surged up from the ground, and the entire immortal temple was overflowing with demonic energy. If one looked from afar, they would see black smoke soaring into the sky above the Thousand Desolation Mountain. Endless black clouds were forming above the entire southern bone continent. Even at night, the black clouds gave off a feeling of the end of the world. This night was destined to be extraordinary. This night was destined to be eternal. All the cultivators and even mortals in the southern bone continent felt that something big was about to happen, because they all felt an indescribable aura coming from the entire white bone continent. Many people were startled awake from their dreams and looked around in confusion. Cultivators could sense strands of devil chi, while mortals could sense a bone-piercing chill. Boom, boom, the entire immortal temple was shaking slightly. The Thousand Desolation Mountain collapsed. Sumo and Guan Xiong were very familiar with this feeling, because it was the rhythm of white bone waking up and breathing. Guan Xiong's expression was extremely ugly. He didn't understand why this was happening. 100 years ago, he and Feng Shi had just sealed white bone. His 7 chess pieces were treasures even more powerful than the undead divine weapon. The seal of the 7 suns' soul-suppressing technique would never be broken. If that was the case, why would white bone still move? Moreover, this rhythm was extremely similar to before. Ling Hu Huan seemed to see the doubt in Guan Xiong's eyes and laughed bitterly. Immortal Void Realm's inheritor, 9 Underworlds, has a technique called soul creation. This technique can damage the mind and soul and create new life. Create new life? Guan Xiong couldn't help but frown. But this place is white bone's feet? The soul enters from the feet and travels through the limbs, going against everything from bottom to top. Similarly, it can regenerate white bone. However, the awakened white bone is already under the control of the soul creator. Actually, this is equivalent to destroying a soul and creating a new one. White bone is still white bone, but it's no longer what it used to be. Everyone heard Ling Hu Huan's explanation. However, many people didn't understand. This was because the cultivators born on the white bone continent didn't know that the white bone continent was actually a set of white bone. However, Master Mute and Sumo both understood. What a powerful technique, Guan Xiong said. At the same time, a hint of worry flashed across his eyes. He couldn't help but look at the red dust fan in Sumo's hand. At this moment, the pendant wasn't shining. It was the white bone's heart. In fact, as long as Sumo could control the white bone's heart, the entire white bone continent would be in Sumo's hands. However, Guan Xiong didn't tell this secret to Sumo. Given Sumo's current realm, she didn't have the ability to completely control white bone. Meanwhile, Li Yuanchu's technique continued. In the void, the fused person's hand seal changed again. Crack, the sky fell and the earth cracked. The entire 10,000 Desolation Mountain was actually split in half along the mountain path. Boom, 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 the earth shook and the mountains were about to split. Master Mute closed his eyes and felt helpless. Chapter 225. The sky was falling and the earth was collapsing. It was like the end of the world. The black and white fusion figure stood in the air like a demon. Li Yuanchu's incantation was still echoing in the air. It was like the call of the end of the world. The entire southern region of the bone continent was shaking. That feeling was even spreading from the southern region to the central region, and then to the northern region. Li Yuanchu's technique was a lever that could move everything. Create the soul. Li Yuanchu's voice boomed like thunder. The black gas in the air instantly condensed into a circle. At first, it was huge, but then it shrank rapidly. In an instant, it condensed into a palm-sized ball. Soul ball! Ling Hu Huan exclaimed. She knew that as long as this soul ball could fall into the depths of the bone continent and travel along the meridians of the bones, it could awaken the bones. The souls of the bones would be controlled by Li Yuanchu. Boom, boom! The entire Thousand Desolation Mountain was still splitting. A bottomless abyss had appeared in the middle of the mountain. Black gas surged in the abyss like waves. Soul return. Li Yuanchu's voice sounded again. At the same time, the fusion figure's hand seal changed again. Whoosh, that soul ball was like a fish swimming into the abyss. At that moment, the mute master's hand seal was completed. His hand seal looked extremely simple. The mute master only put his palms together, and the string of prayer beads coiled around his hand. The mute master's lips moved, but no sound came out. In this life, the mute master might have forgotten his own voice. However, at that moment, the mute master's expression was solemn, and his eyes were filled with pity. That was because his technique required the power of all beings in the bone. Otherwise, it would not be able to suppress the bones. Furthermore, when the black soul ball entered the abyss, it had already entered the meridians of the bone continent. That soul ball turned into a stream of light and headed north. It was moving along the meridians of the bones. However, at that moment, the mute master's technique was completed. 3,000 li away, White Lotus Town. The old shaman did not sleep that night. At this moment, he had already changed into a brand new white robe. That white robe was what he wore every year when he presided over the sacrifice. However, no one understood why he was dressed so grandly tonight. In fact, when the old priest changed into his white robe and walked out of his house to the small square, almost no one saw him. Because, in White Lotus Town, in the dead of night, everything was silent. Walking through the entire town, the old priest looked at everything with a smile. He hoped that everything would always be so peaceful. Tuck, tuck. The old priest's footsteps were very rhythmic. The sound of footsteps echoed on the bluestone path. The old priest had already arrived at the small square and was beside the lotus sculpture. That lotus was slender and elegant, ready to bloom. It was as white as jade, vivid and lifelike. It was as if a cool breeze was blowing, and in the next moment, it would unhurriedly open. Even at night, the lotus sculpture seemed to be emitting a faint light. The old shaman used his old arm to gently stroke the lotus. Perhaps in the eyes of the townspeople, the lotus was merely a statue or a totem, but in the eyes of the old priest, the lotus was a living existence. In fact, the old priest could even feel its pulse and fragrance. Chi chi chi. On Thousand Desolation Mountain, when the demonic energy surged into the sky, the old priest saw it clearly. However, there was no panic in his eyes. Instead, there was a hint of a smile. Because the ultimate value of his existence was for this day. The love monk. The holy monk. Even though it was only an ethereal legend on the continent of bones, they all believed that it had once existed. Of course, the old priest believed it even more. We are all willing to sacrifice for you. No. Or rather, we are all willing to sacrifice for all living beings. A true Buddha does not care if you have a soul or a soulless person. Even without a soul or path, you will still exist forever. Because all living beings are equal. Even if you are a plant, you are still a living being, let alone the person on the continent of bones. Buddha is merciful. The old priest bowed in the direction of Thousand Desolation Temple. Chi chi chi, chi chi chi. Traces of demonic energy and coldness came from the continent of bones. However, the old priest clasped his hands together and remained unmoved. However, his expression was even more solemn. At that moment there was a Buddha in his heart. To him, what was about to arrive was the most sacred moment. As expected, not even a moment had passed. Endless Sanskrit sounds rang in the old priest's ears. Those were true Sanskrit sounds. Only the 3,000 priests on the continent of bones could understand them. Namo? Ho? Ho? Do? Hang? Dirank? Yeah. Polujiamper? Blinking bowl? Buddha is merciful. This disciple is willing to use his body to light the lamp. Buddha Lotus Demon Suppression. The old priest replied in a clear voice. Actually, no one could hear his reply. But he had to say it. May all living beings be happy and free from the sea of suffering. The old priest's hands changed and formed a seal that he only knew in his life. He could only form that seal once in his life, because that technique would absorb his life force. As his hands changed, the old priest's expression was holy and natural. Whoosh, when he looked again, the old priest's body suddenly lit up with endless brilliance. Buddhist light shone from his white robe. At the same time, a flame flickered between the old priest's brows. Lamplighter. The old priest was the lamplighter. However, they used their bodies as a guide and their souls to light the lamp. Whoosh, as the light flickered between the old priest's brows, his entire body was withering, because his life force was burning. Then, the old priest's body started to dissipate. That dissipation came from the bottom up. The old priest's body slowly turned into specks of starlight. The old priest's expression was calm and at ease. At the very last moment, the old priest's smile disappeared. Whoosh, the flame flickered and the old priest turned into a lamp. Then, the lamp landed on the lotus statue. Whoosh, the lotus immediately gave off a strange light. Immortal energy rippled and rippled. The lotus came to life and gave off a myriad of lights. The lamp landed in the stamen of the flower. The lamp and the lotus became one, the Buddhist light shining on the infinite world. At this time, the entire White Lotus town was as bright as day. Everyone in the town woke up from their dreams, because at that moment, they felt a tremor that came from their souls. Unfortunately, they didn't see what the old priest did. Between the infinite worlds, many people and many things were like this. They protected you, but you never knew it. They watched over you without saying a word, and they would even die for you. Mute was like this, and so was the old priest. As the lotus swayed, the entire White Lotus town seemed to have come from the Buddhist realm. And such a thing was happening at the same time in every town within a 10,000-mile radius. That kind of sacrifice, that kind of death, that kind of decisiveness, that kind of living for the masses. That kind of true Buddhist heart. 3,000 lotus could suppress bones. No one could tell when these Buddhist lotuses were planted, and no one could tell who planted them. But on this night, all the lotus bloomed. Beneath the bones, there really were meridians. Then these white lotuses were nails hammered into these meridians. The bones were pinned down by the lotus. The so-called soul mass had no way to go, no way to hide. Chapter 226. White bones giving birth to lotuses, lotus suppressing white bones. That was definitely an earth-shattering technique. At this moment, someone was looking down at the white bone continent from high up in the sky. That person in purple dress could not help but smile bitterly. Lotuses could really form under the feet of the white bones. This was something that she had never thought of. Just like that, the white bones could be said to be nailed to the Pure Land world, unable to cause any more wave. In the future, only those who could pluck lotuses could open the seal. But who is that monk? Zi frowned slightly. Because that earth-shattering technique was a lotus technique. The so-called lotus technique was not an ordinary existence. In theory, in the Pure Land world, there should not be anyone who could use the lotus technique. Moreover, on the white bone continent. However, that young monk had done the impossible. But even Zi could not see through mute. Thus, she could only smile faintly and form a seal with one hand. A ray of light emitted from her palm. Within the light, a small sound transmission paper crane appeared. The paper crane spread its wings, piercing through space and time. And at some unknown place, the paper crane landed in the hands of a girl in white dress. The girl in white took the paper crane, and then sent out spiritual power from her palm. Long let Guan Xiong return. The white bone continent should not have any more waves. There is no point in him being a patrol envoy. A faint but pleasant voice came from the paper crane. When the girl in white heard this, the corner of her mouth curled up. Fatty Guan, you are free. The girl in white put away the paper crane and muttered to herself. Then, she took a step forward and disappeared without a trace. The border of the white bone continent was filled with sky trenches. The sky trenches were bottomless, and waves of air surged. Legends said that there were tens of thousands of demons and spirits in the sky trenches. The sky trenches hid all the grievances, helplessness, and pain of the Pure Land world. They roared and laughed, hissed day and night. Some said that below the sky trenches was seawater. That seawater was the tears of all the people in the Pure Land world. Their tears formed an ocean, and their blood turned into demons. 3,000 li of the border of the white bone continent was already barren and devoid of life, because they were too close to the sky trenches. Above the sky trenches was endless fog that covered the sky and covered the earth. No one knew how deep the chasm was, and no one knew how long it was. However, the heavenly chasm existed between the continents of the Pure Land world. The Pure Land heavenly chasm could not be crossed unless one was a deity tribulation. It was a physical barrier between the continents. Only deity tribulation cultivators could cross the heaven chasm and reach another continent. At this moment, a purple lotus platform flew over from the sky ditch. The purple lotus platform seemed to have appeared out of thin air because it had pierced through space-time to arrive. A white-clothed girl sat on the lotus platform. She had a delicate appearance and a spirited gaze. The purple lotus platform emitted a faint purple light. Within the heavenly trench, everything had to retreat because of it. Wherever the lotus platform passed, everything within 1,000 feet was clear. None of the demons in the heaven trench dared to approach. In fact, as soon as the purple lotus throne passed through, the enraged howls within the heaven trench ceased. At this moment, on Mount Wanhuang, Li Yuanchu and Li Yuanyi's combined body had already sunk into silence, because they also saw lotus flowers blooming on the ground within a perimeter of the 1,000 Desolation Temple. At that moment it was as if the entire southern bone region was filled with Buddhist energy. The Buddhist energy was dense and the lotus flowers were endless. The entire southern bone region was illuminated by Buddhist light. It was as if the world had changed. At this moment, all of the small town's residents had awakened. They spontaneously gathered at their respective plazas, praying, kneeling. The thoughts of all living beings gathered within the Buddhist lotus, forming an ocean-like power that poured into the white bone meridians. 3,000 Buddha lotus? Li Yuanchu's voice rang out. The 3,000 Buddha lotus was actually a legend that had been passed down for tens of thousands of years in the white bone continent. Many people thought that it was just an unrealistic fantasy. In fact, for many years, everyone thought that the one who planted the Buddhist lotus was the 1,000 Desolation Temple. The 1,000 Desolation Temple enjoyed its success and never explained. Thus, the 1,000 Desolation Temple was extremely popular. It was endlessly beautiful. However, only after this night did they realize that there was a true Buddha in the 1,000 Desolation Temple, but it was not the unaging monk. Li Yuanchu and Li Yuanyi obviously knew about the 3,000 Buddha lotus, but they did not think much of it, because they never thought that the mute monk from 10,000 years ago could actually activate the 3,000 Buddha lotus. One Buddhist lotus, one nail, 3,000 Buddha lotuses determine life and death. At this moment, the soul ball had not even left the white bone southern region when it was nailed into the white bone meridians by the Buddhist lotus. Could not move at all. Rumble, rumble. The soul ball kept struggling and crashing in the white bone meridians. However, it was all to no avail. In the white bone southern region, mountains collapsed and rivers flowed in reverse. There were even places that were destroyed by the soul ball's struggle. Countless mortals and immortals died. However, all of this could not change the fate of the soul ball being nailed to death. Li Yuanchu's expression was extremely ugly. This far exceeded their expectations. The mute monk should be like them, not an existence from the white bone continent. Otherwise, he would not have such power. Mute monk, you are not a white bone man? Where are you from? Li Yuanchu's voice asked. However, the mute monk shook his head lightly. He did not speak, as if he did not want to answer Li Yuanchu's question. The white-boned southern region, the legend of the love monk. You are talking about you, right? Li Yuanchu's voice asked again. Because he could not accept this. 100,000 years, all for nothing. Love monk? Those two words seemed to have moved the mute monk. A strange look flashed across his eyes, and then he finally nodded. At that moment, even Sumo was shocked. Because, when he saw the children's game, he thought that it was about the founder of the Wanwang Temple. But how could the mute monk be the love monk? All of this, regardless of time or space, does not match. Isn't the mute monk the fourth disciple of the Holy Wheel? Sumo had doubts in her heart, and she habitually looked at Guan Xiong, who was not far away. Guan Xiong laughed bitterly, then shook his head. Sumo, I can only tell you that I have heard of a cultivation state called rebirth state. However, I do not know how much higher that state is than the undead state. To me, it is an unreachable existence. Legend has it that people in the rebirth state can come back as they wish. Guan Xiong transmitted his voice. At that moment, Sumo's heart shook. Because there was a state called rebirth state. Rebirth state. At that moment, Sumo thought of the senior brothers and sisters of the Wind Wheel sect. At that moment, Sumo also thought of Mu Jinghong, who had amazed the White Bones for 3,000 years. Sumo, 3 lifetimes as one, I will wait for you in rebirth. You will meet me again. That sentence rang in Sumo's ears again. A flame rose in Sumo's heart. That was a wisp of passion that her withered heart had never had in 100 years. Actually, Guan Xiong had said that there must be rebirth. However, Sumo did not believe it. But, at this moment, only rebirth could explain everything about the mute monk. Just now, he saw the mute monk nod with his own eyes. The mute monk admitted that he was the love monk. Then, of course, there must be rebirth. Sumo's hands trembled slightly because of excitement. Chapter 227. The Love Monk. The skeletal cultivators looked at each other. Even the Bliss Palace Lord, Ling Huahuan, was slightly taken aback. Which cultivator in the southern region didn't know about the legend of the Love Monk? There were many versions of the legend of the Love Monk. He swore to fight against demons with a merciful heart. He shaved his hair for love and lost all hope. Regardless of the story, he was a man of love and righteousness, a merciful and compassionate man in all versions. The moment the mute man nodded, everyone turned to look at the gray-robed monk. They didn't even believe it. Was that young monk really the love monk? There was sorrow in the mute man's eyes, but there was also compassion. He put his palms together and the Buddhist beads in his hands rotated gently. Perhaps one revolution was a lifetime. Rebirth state. Li Yuanchu's voice was trembling. Because even for him, that was a realm that was far beyond his reach. However, the mute man before him was only a mid-stage deity tribulation cultivator. Therefore, Li Yuanchu and Li Yuan's fusion cultivator thought there was still hope. After all, they were peak deity tribulation cultivators. If the mute man was the love monk, it only proved that he used to be in the rebirth state. However, he might not have reached that level in this life. Controlling the skeletons was no longer possible. They could only fight to the death. That was what Li Yuanchu and Li Yuani were thinking. Whoosh! The fusion cultivator hissed at the sky and howled like a demon. His hands formed a seal, and the black and white light once again rose from their bodies. Deity Tribulation Cultivator. That aura still enveloped the Desolation Mountain. Die! Li Yuanchu's voice suddenly shouted. Boom! The fusion man's surroundings suddenly shone with light. The light was formless. However, it turned into thousands of wind blades in an instant and swept toward the mute man, Guan Xiong, Sumo, and the others. It was an indiscriminate deity tribulation technique. Boom, boom, the sky fell and the earth cracked. Rocks flew everywhere. Everything in the path of the deity tribulation wind blades turned into ashes. However, at this time, the cultivators who were still alive were basically in Sumo's array formation. The formation was as stable as a mountain because it was guarded by 9 skeletons. Not even the power of a peak deity tribulation cultivator could break it. On the contrary, rays of gray light started to radiate from the white skeleton. There was even a faint mist rising. Others might not know about that fog, but Sumo knew that it was the fog in the still Death Valley. Boom, crack. At that moment, the combined bodies of Li Yuanchu and Li Yuanyi seemed to have gone mad, constantly attacking Sumo's formation. It seemed like he was going to fulfill his promise. Everyone, no one can leave today. In fact, the Li brothers could choose to leave at this moment. And with the mute man's temperament, he might not do anything to them. But now they had completely lost their minds. 100,000 years of scheming, all for naught. Who could be so calm and collected? Therefore, it was completely normal for him to go crazy or even hysterical at this time. Moreover, the Li brothers understood that they had no other way out. Nether City would never forgive those who failed to control white bones and raise demons. Linghu Huan was just a pathfinder. No one knew better than them exactly what sort of power the 9th Nether City possessed, and what it meant. The city at the bottom of the bitter samsara sea was their nightmare. Therefore, at this moment they no longer had too many goals. They only wanted to kill, to vent their anger. Howl, Kiki. The combined bodies continued to attack, letting out demonic howls. Master Mute frowned. He seemed to be hesitating. Guan Xiong watched from the side and hurriedly said, "Master, killing evil people is good. If they don't die, there will be endless troubles in the future." At this moment, everyone had the same thought. Sumo did not speak, but he gently opened the ancient mortal fan. The pendant on the ancient fan was already faintly shining. Red dust. The 2 ancient characters were faintly discernible, and at this moment, Sumo's palm was warm. He knew that if he took out the ancient mortal fan now, he would be able to fill the sky with red sand. He was not sure if he could deal with Li Yuanchu and Li Yuanyi, but that was a method that Sumo could still use. However, at this moment, everyone seemed to be waiting for the mute master to make his move. Because he was the love monk, he had left behind too many legends in the southern domain of white bones. Finally, the mute master nodded. Whoosh, whoosh, his gray monk robe, wide sleeves, rolled up. The mute master put his palms together. His body slowly rose straight up. At first, there were wisps of cloud chi under his feet. Then, the cloud chi gradually turned into a lotus platform. Others might not understand what the lotus platform represented, but Guan Xiong's eyes instantly emitted a strange light. A lotus under his feet. The mute master was definitely not in the middle stage of the deity tribulation. The lotus was bathed in divine light. The mute master directly flew out of Sumo's white bones and skulls formation, calmly standing in the void. The power of the deity tribulation whistled in the void. But that tyrannical power disappeared without a trace when it was more than 10 feet away from the mute master. At that moment, no one could distinguish the aura of the mute master, because no one could see his realm. Looking again, the mute master separated his hands. The string of Buddhist beads was cast in the void, and between his hands, a white long sword slowly appeared. That sword, unexpectedly, did not have a sword hilt. It was like a stream of light. That reminded Sumo of Mu Jinghong's black sword. The 2 sword lights were somewhat similar. The mute warrior squinted his eyes at Li Yuanchu and Li Yuanyi. Killing evil people is a kind act. How could the mute man not understand this logic? At the same time, he looked down at the 3,000 white lotuses on the land of white bones. 3,000 white lotuses, 3,000 lamplighting men. For the peace of this world, there would always be sacrifices. That was the true meaning of, if I don't enter hell, who will? The 3,000 lamplighters were all gone, so what was his obsession? Therefore, the mute master finally smiled. He had figured it out. In this life, his fate with the white bone continent should end. Immediately after, the white longsword in his hand was aimed directly at Li Yuanchu and Li Yuanyi's fusion body. Zhang Xian willed. Whoosh, the white sword of light flew out directly. And at that moment, the Li brothers' combined body was completely frozen in the void. Restraining a grand perfection deity tribulation? Li Yuanchu and Li Yuanyi's eyes were filled with endless fear. It was a feeling of terror that only they could feel. The other cultivators thought that they couldn't dodge it, but they knew that they couldn't move. That was a battle on a completely different level. The mute master had been showing mercy. Chi, boom. The white sword of light pierced through the void, directly piercing the forehead of the combined body. There was actually a bitter soul pagoda in that position. But the mute master's sword, even the pagoda was destroyed together. An earth-shattering noise. It shook the entire world of white bones. Endless dust shot up to the sky. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. Emptiness to emptiness, nothingness to nothingness. 10,000 years of admiring the world of mortals, a lifetime of white bones. Just as the white sword of light killed everything, the mute master finally spoke. The vow of silence was finally broken. Chapter 228. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust, void to void, nothingness to nothingness. The mute master's words echoed throughout the southern bone region. At that moment it wasn't Sanskrit, but it was better than Sanskrit. After a lifetime of silence, the mute master finally spoke. As soon as he opened his mouth, he killed a perfected deity tribulation cultivator. Black and white light swam in the air of the thousand desolation mountain. Wisps, wisps, pieces, blossoms, the remnants of the light were like broken leaves and flowers, like fragmented jade. Drifting, drifting. Nothing was left of Li Yuanchu and Li Yuanyi under the mute master's sword. The black and white figure and the pagoda were gone. Everything had turned into nothingness. There was only smoke and an indescribable aura in the air. Then, the morning sun rose and the east turned white. However, this morning, there was no drum of dusk, no ringing of the morning bell. The thousand desolation temple, or the immortal temple, disappeared from the bone continent forever. The 3,000 Buddha lotuses were enough to suppress everything. Amitabha, at this moment, the mute master chanted the name of Buddha. However, an illusory projection appeared above his head. The projection wore a white robe and had Buddhist beads around his neck. His body emitted auspicious Buddhist light. Beneath his feet was a 9-layered lotus platform. He was warm and smiling, compassionate and affectionate. It was a monk of unparalleled beauty. Love monk. Hua. At that moment the projection emitted endless light. The red sun just happened to erupt. That red sun served as his back. At that moment it was like a real Buddha had descended. At that moment the entire white bone continent saw that Buddha figure. The great figures of the bone region and the northern region all looked up. In the divine tribulation sect, Bai Lai narrowed his eyes. The image of the Buddha was reflected in his eyes at that moment. Love monk. Bai Lai smiled in his heart, but he didn't say anything. At this moment, countless people knelt in the southern bone region. Love monk, holy monk. In White Lotus Town, the children shouted, "Look, the love monk has arrived. Kneel." At that moment, everyone was worshipping him with great devotion. In the ruins of the 10,000 Desolation Mountain, many cultivators also knelt on the ground. It was because the Passion Monk was an exceptional expert, someone who was far beyond his reach. Even Guan Xiong and Linghu Huan were kneeling on the ground. Sumo was the same. She knelt on the 10,000 Desolation Mountain, her heart filled with sincerity. At this time, all of Sumo's skeletons and magical weapons have been put back into the storage pouch. All living beings are suffering. Buddha is merciful. Master Mute looked at the crowd and said slowly. At that moment, there was no sadness or joy in his eyes, only incomparable calm. His fate with white bones had come to an end. He was about to leave this place. Once he spoke, he would leave the white bones. Finally, the mute master's gaze fell on Sumo. Sumo, you definitely came to the immortal temple for a reason. What are you confused about? I am willing to answer your questions. Then, everything about the 5 wheels will be completed, the mute master said slowly. He seemed to know everything about Sumo. Ancestor. Disciple truly does have some doubts. Sumo kowtowed deeply, and then she asked, May I ask, Ancestor, is there reincarnation in the world? Reincarnation? The mute master revealed a faint smile. If you are willing, then there will definitely be reincarnation. Then where is reincarnation? Where is reincarnation? When the mute master heard this question, a trace of grief flashed past his eyes. Sumo, the vast universe is boundless, and there are countless worlds. You ask me where reincarnation is, but I do not know either. It is because everyone's reincarnation is different. It could be in this world, or it could be in another world. It could be within a single step, or it could be millions of li away. Ancestor, then will I be able to meet her in reincarnation? Sumo didn't mention Mu Jinghong. It was because he knew that the mute master's ancestor definitely knew everything. The mute master looked at Sumo, shook his head, and then smiled. At that moment, the passion monk above his head also seemed to smile. In their eyes, Sumo was like an incomparably naive child. Sumo. The mute master called. Disciple is here. Sumo replied. Haven't you already met her in reincarnation? The mute master smiled. Sumo was slightly stunned. Met, it is just meeting. As long as fate has not ended, of course we will meet again. The mute master said, It is just that when and where, who will we meet again? No one dares to say. You figure it out yourself. Reincarnation, there must be. You must believe. The mute master's voice was slightly heavy. But, he gave Sumo a definite answer. Disciple thanks Ancestor for dispelling my doubts. At that moment, Sumo's eyes were filled with tears. Because, he was indeed the answer he hoped for. Sumo, what other doubts do you have? The mute master asked again. Disciple's heart has no doubts. Sumo replied. The mute master shook his head and smiled. Sumo, there is injustice in your heart, and it has been lingering for 100 years. How can you have no doubts? Sumo was stunned again. The mute master continued, Sumo, the Windwheel Masters have found a home. They are not from the White Bone mainland. Neither are Fengshi. They did not deliberately hide many things from you, but summer insects cannot talk about ice. Your realm is not high enough, so your words are useless, because you will not understand. In this sense, they have never lied to you. The mute master said slowly. Sumo's heart stirred. Because that was indeed the crux in Sumo's heart. The experience of the 5 wheels was a pain in Sumo's heart. He really did not understand what they did. However, Sumo was not willing to admit it. Thank you, Ancestor. Sumo sighed. He was willing to believe the mute master's words. Then, he thought of something and asked, May I ask, Ancestor, what does it mean to kill for all living beings and have no regrets in this life? To enjoy 100,000 years of peace, what crime have I committed? Sumo asked a sentence from the Holy Wheel Ancestor's behest. The mute master heard it and sighed. Sumo, you should understand that a strong man should cut his losses. If the Holy Wheel Ancestor did not bear the name of killing, the White Bone mainland would have been awakened. That was a condition of exchange. Killing the Slekton sect in exchange for 100,000 years of peace. Exchange with who? Sumo frowned. The Chaotic Gods mainland, the Corpseless sect, the mute master said. The Corpseless sect? Sumo had never heard of this name. At this moment, Guan Xiong's expression changed slightly. The Corpseless sect is the oldest immortal sect in the Pure Land. Their level of controlling and refining corpses is unimaginable. 70,000 years ago, they traveled to the White Bone mainland to awaken the bones. Because the bones are prey in their eyes. To protect the bones and more living beings, The Holy Wheel Ancestor promised them to kill 20,000 disciples of the Slekton sect. The corpseless sect promised the Holy Wheel Ancestor not to awaken the bones for 100,000 years. Oh! Sumo raised her eyebrows. The corpseless sect. Even Feng Shi doesn't know about this. The mute master smiled bitterly. The Holy Wheel Ancestor also told me to keep my mouth shut. However, I've broken the silent meditation, so it's okay to say it. Sumo finally knew the reason why the Holy Wheel Ancestor betrayed the Holy Wheel Ancestor. Why did the mute master practice the silent meditation? Sumo said. The mute master laughed. Because all words are illusory. Whether I say it or not, the Buddha's heart is there. A lifetime of silence is the most wonderful thing in 1,000 words. Sumo, you should remember that everything is actually a cultivation. Chapter 229. Everything was a form of cultivation. The mute master's words reverberated in Sumo's ears. When she looked again, the projection above the mute master's head had already started to dissipate. Then, the mute master put his palms together again. We are fated to meet. The mute master looked at Sumo and said slowly. Sumo, you have a soul. So, don't delay your cultivation. This item will help you cross the sky ditch and travel the Pure Land. Then, the mute master waved his hand. A streak of white light flew over. It was a lotus petal that landed in Sumo's palm. That lotus petal can turn into a lotus boat, enough for you to cross the sky ditch, the mute master said again. Then, he looked at the white bone continent again. His gaze slowly moved from south to north. That gaze seemed to see through the entire white bone continent. In the direction of the God Tribulation sect, his gaze paused for a moment and then retracted. Amitabha, the mute master chanted one last time, and then his hand seal changed. Whoosh, wind blew across the entire white bone southern region. In an instant, the fragrance of the lotus spread through the air. When they looked again, the mute master's figure quickly retreated, heading straight for the sky ditch 10,000 li away. He went further and further away, fading away. At the edge of the white bone continent, endless roars could be heard. There were thousands of vicious beasts and demons. However, the mute master's figure directly disappeared into the mist of the sky ditch. Everyone felt a sense of loss in their hearts. At this moment, the sun hung high in the sky. This was the first day after the immortal temple disappeared in the white bone southern region. The 1,000 Desolation Mountain had been split in half from the middle. The entire 1,000 Desolation Mountain had undergone a fundamental change. Now, this place could only be called the 1,000 Desolation Ruins. Many cultivators of the white bone southern region first thanked Sumo. Because, without Sumo's formation, none of them would have survived. Then, they left one after another. Above the white bone continent, for millions of years, sects often changed. Life and cultivation had to continue. From then on, the white bone southern region entered the 1,000 Desolation era. In the end, only Sumo, Guanxiong, Linghu Hihuan, and the other female cultivators of the Bliss Palace were left. Linghu Hihuan came over and thanked Sumo and Guanxiong. Thank you for helping me, Linghu Hihuan said with a smile. The white robe was still loose, revealing Linghu Hihuan's fragrant shoulders, causing one's imagination to run wild. At this moment, Linghu Hihuan had completely recovered the alluring demeanor of the Palace Lord of Bliss Palace. Sumo was fine. At this time, he was still immersed in the conversation with the mute master. However, Guanxiong could not shift his gaze away. The female cultivator from the Bliss Palace was the last to survive. Even the female cultivator who had been invaded by the devil and then possessed by the wandering North Soul had lost all of her devil intent, but she had yet to awaken. Palace Master Blissful, you're welcome, Sumo said plainly. The hero rescues the damsel in distress. Guanxiong's small eyes lit up. Among the 20 blissful female cultivators in front of him, which one of them wasn't a peerless beauty? Ling Hu He Huan pursed his lips into a smile and looked at Guan Xiong. Senior Divine Tribulation, if you're interested, why don't you come to my palace for a few days? I guarantee that you'll enjoy all the bliss in the world. Ling Hu He Huan's innocence was accompanied by endless seduction. It was an indescribable feeling. Guan Xiong was a divine tribulation cultivator, but he could not help but feel smug at that moment. However, it was not the art of seduction, but an invincible charm. Cough, cough. Guan Xiong faked a cough and could not help but steal a glance at Sumo. However, Sumo's expression did not change at all. The female cultivators from the Bliss Palace seemed to be ordinary women in Sumo's eyes. Ling Hu He Huan glanced at the female cultivators from the Bliss Palace. The female cultivators immediately understood what the palace lord meant. The female cultivators around the ox cart all knelt down and begged with a pleasant voice, "Senior Divine Tribulation, please come to my palace to enjoy bliss." 16 beauties as beautiful as flowers and jade invited him together. Guan Xiong's chubby face shone with endless radiance. All these years, he had been hiding his identity as a divine tribulation cultivator on the Bone mainland. Therefore, it was rare for Guan Xiong to be treated with such respect. After the battle, Guan Xiong felt even more relaxed. The black and white female cultivator immediately came over and supported Guan Xiong from both sides. She even purposely pressed her body against Guan Xiong's and said with a coquettish voice, "I am willing to serve you, senior." Only the green-clothed female cultivator who led the ox did not move. She looked at everything calmly. Her soft voice and fragrance assailed his nostrils. Guan Xiong's left and right arms were pressed against the soft jades, and he instantly enjoyed it. At that moment, the black and white bliss messengers no longer had the murderous aura they had the night before. They were clearly women made of water, and they were incredibly charming. At that moment, Guan Xiong almost forgot who he was. Hee. Guan Xiong looked at Sumo with a grin. "What do you think, Sumo? Shall we take a look at the Bliss Palace?" Sumo glanced at Guan Xiong and smirked. "Sure." Guan Xiong was initially worried that Sumo would not agree to it. However, he did not expect Sumo to agree so readily. This time, it was exactly what he wanted. Enjoying himself once might not mean anything. Guan Xiong's thoughts began to race. His hand naturally wrapped around the slender waist of the black and white messengers. Wherever his palm touched, there was a stretch of softness. The black and white messengers smiled charmingly, but they did not dodge at all. "Hey!" Guan Xiong was a little carried away. His eyes narrowed into slits. "Little Su, you're a good friend. Let's enjoy our blessings together." However, Sumo looked at Guan Xiong and shook her head. "Guan Xiong, do you know why I agreed to it?" "Why?" Guan Xiong was stunned. "Because I'm afraid that if I don't go, no one will collect your corpse." Sumo smirked. Sumo's cold water did not seem to extinguish the endless passion in Guan Xiong's heart. "Sumo, it's not necessary. We'll stay for a day or two, then leave." "No problem at all." At that moment, before Sumo could answer, a young girl's voice suddenly came from the void. "Why bother? Since you're going, why don't you just stay in the Bliss Palace? I think it's better. Enjoy yourself every day and sing every night. That's the life of a deity." Hee. Ugh. Guan Xiong was halfway through his laughter when his expression suddenly changed. "Go." Guan Xiong shook his shoulders and sent the black and white emissaries beside him flying. Ouch! The two black and white emissaries were using the art of seduction, and it was extremely effective. Guan Xiong felt like his bones were going soft. However, he did not expect the fatty to suddenly change his expression. The power of the deity's tribulation sent them flying. They were perfected nascent soul cultivators, but before Guan Xiong, they were like mortals. They had no power to resist at all. They were sent flying just like that, and it was two at a time. Poor Guan Xiong. Ling Hu He Huan's expression changed slightly as well. That was because she suddenly felt an extremely dangerous aura. A peerless powerhouse was nearby. Guan Xiong quickly tidied up his clothes and knelt on the ground in a panic. Your servant greets the first mistress. Sumo was stunned as well. However, at that moment, a figure gradually materialized in midair. It was a woman in white, sitting on a purple lotus seat. The woman in white had an elegant face and a spirited gaze. However, her expression was frosty at the moment. Chapter 230. The white-robed girl sat on the lotus seat, exuding boundless might. It was not just the might of one's cultivation level, but another level of might. Guan Xiong was a deity tribulation almighty, one of the few beings on the White Bone mainland. At this moment, all the cultivators at the scene were shocked. Sumo had never seen the white-robed girl before, and she had never heard Guan Xiong mention her. Who was this white-robed girl who appeared out of nowhere? Guan Xiong, do you still remember me, the young mistress? The white-robed girl spoke again. Huh! Guan Xiong's face was drenched in sweat. He was truly afraid. Sumo had never seen Guan Xiong so afraid. Just now, Guan Xiong was extremely calm even when facing powerful enemies in the middle and late stages of the deity tribulation realm. However, in front of the white-clothed girl, Guan Xiong's body trembled. In truth, Sumo did not know that part of Guan Xiong's confidence came from the white-robed girl. Therefore, he was not afraid even when facing a perfected deity tribulation. There was nothing to be afraid of if there was always someone backing you up. Be it Sumo or Linghu Huan, none of them could tell the white-robed girl's realm. Even a perfected spirit transformation realm could not tell the other party's realm. Could she be at the undead realm? Sumo and Linghu Huan pondered. Young mistress, I was wrong. I was just joking, I wouldn't dare to cross the line. Guan Xiong quickly kowtowed. The young mistress rarely called him by his name. Little fatty, damned fatty, those were the young mistress's catchphrases, making them seem intimate. However, the words Guan Xiong sent a chill down his spine. It meant that the white-robed girl was truly enraged. Humph! Guan Xiong, if I was a moment later, you would have been in the Bliss Palace's gentle home. The white-robed girl's expression did not improve at all. Do you remember what I told you that day? The white-robed girl said angrily. Huh! Guan Xiong broke out in cold sweat, looking awkward. You don't remember? The white-robed girl became even more furious. I remember. Guan Xiong quickly said. Speak. Ugh. Guan Xiong's expression became even more awkward. Are you going to speak or not? The white-robed young lady angrily shouted from atop the lotus platform. I say. Guan Xiong lowered his head even more. He hesitated for a moment before saying, If I have sex with a woman in the Bone Continent. Miss, cut off my little bird and feed it to your bird. After saying that, Guan Xiong did not dare to raise his head again. Most of the female cultivators from the Bliss Palace were amused. The black and white envoys were laughing so hard that they were shaking. Linghu Huan could not help but smile as well. Ha ha ha, Sumo laughed heartily. Little Su Zi, what are you laughing at? Guan Xiong angrily rebuked Sumo with a flushed face. He didn't dare to look at the white-clothed girl, but he dared to talk back to Sumo. Hee. Damn fatty, I'm laughing because my black-feathered deity Hong has food to eat. Sumo deliberately angered him. Actually, when Sumo heard the white-clothed girl's question, she clearly wanted to embarrass Guan Xiong. Looking at the white-clothed girl's expression, he knew that the thunder was loud but the rain was small. If the white-clothed girl really wanted to do something to Xiong, she would have already done so. Now, he was just scaring Guan Xiong. Hee hee. The white-clothed girl sneered. Guan Xiong, it's good that you remember. I, Miao Longer, will definitely keep my word. Let's go. Guan Xiong was stunned. He raised his head and asked, Eldest miss, where are we going? Back to the chaotic gods' continent, of course. Cut up the bird and feed it to the bird. the white-clothed girl snorted coldly. Then, she flicked her hand and shot out a purple light. That purple light was extremely special. Both Sumo and Linghu Huan felt their souls tremble. Sumo even felt that the purple light was more powerful than 9 Nether's divine dragon binding rope. At that moment, the two of them could not help but look at each other. That power was too terrifying. Chi. The purple light trapped Guan Xiong, while the other end was in the hands of the white-clothed girl. Guan Xiong didn't dare to resist at all. Of course, he knew that he didn't have the ability to resist. The white-clothed girl didn't say a word. She didn't even look at Sumo and Linghu Huan. Instead, she grabbed Guan Xiong's hand and headed straight for the Bone Heaven Trench. Was he really going back to the Chaotic Gods continent? Guan Xiong was dumbfounded. What he didn't know was that the white-clothed girl, Miao Long was here on her master's orders. The Bone Continent no longer needed him as a patrol envoy. However, Guan Xiong really thought that the young lady was angry and wanted to cut up the bird and feed it to the bird. "Sumo, save me! Sumo, save me!" Guan Xiong cried and wailed. Tears and snot streamed down his face. In fact, if he couldn't do it himself, how could Sumo save him? He was crying for the white-clothed girl to see. At the last moment, Guan Xiong spat out a white light from his mouth. The white light was a special jade scroll. "Sumo, this is for you. For the sake of our 100 years together, you must come to the Chaotic Gods continent and save me." The white-clothed girl didn't care about Guan Xiong. In fact, she saw the jade scroll that Guan Xiong spat out, but she didn't care at all. The purple lotus flew up. She was holding the poor Guan Xiong's hand. It was like holding a ball. Then, the white-clothed girl and Guan Xiong disappeared into the depths of the trench. Guan Xiong's wailing could no longer be heard. However, they disappeared in a different direction than the mute master. They should have gone in 2 different directions. Guan Xiong also left. Sumo smiled bitterly. In the past 100 years, Guan Xiong would always disappear for a few days. However, this time was different. Sumo understood that she probably wouldn't be able to see Guan Xiong for a while. Sumo felt a little disappointed. Who was that white-clothed girl? Miao Long. Sumo remembered the white-clothed girl's name. Brother Su. Linghu Huan cupped his fist at Sumo and smiled. "Just now, we invited you with great hospitality. We implicated Senior Guan. Please don't blame us, Brother Su." Linghu Huan bowed politely. The rest of the Bliss Palace disciples also bowed. However, at this moment, every single one of the female cultivators was extremely solemn, and there was no sign of flirtatiousness. "Brother Linghu, you're too serious," Sumo also said politely. "Who is that white-clothed girl?" Linghu Huan asked. He. Sumo smiled and shook her head. She did not say anything. Since Sumo did not say anything, Linghu Huan did not ask further. "Brother Su, I'll be taking my leave too." Linghu Huan looked at Sumo with a strange glint in her eyes. At that moment, Sumo's heart skipped a beat. That was because Sumo felt as if someone had peeped into her heart. At that moment, Linghu Huan smiled. One had to admit that the palace master of Bliss Palace was an exquisite woman. Her smile and frown were both beautiful. "Brother Su, we're fated. I'll give you something as repayment for your help today." As he spoke, Linghu Huan raised a hand. A black token landed in Sumo's hand. The ancient words 9 Nether were engraved on it. Sumo was stunned. "Brother Su, this is a 9 Nether token. With this token, you can enter 9 Nether City in the future. If you're in trouble, you can shatter this token. As long as you're in the pure world, someone will definitely save you. However, you can only use it once," Linghu Huan said. Then, before Sumo could say anything, "Farewell." Linghu Huan's figure moved and flew into the ox carriage. The green-clothed girl looked at Sumo deeply before leading the ox back into the carriage. The 5-colored divine ox's hooves generated clouds. The other female cultivators rode the wind. He. Ling Hu He Huan's laughter came from the carriage. Brother Su, I hope you find that Mu girl. Actually, my surname is Mu too. The Bliss Palace is definitely not a filthy place. However, the public's words can melt gold. Sumo was stunned. Chapter 231. There was a small town at the edge of the Bone mainland. Its name was Nameless. Nameless Town was exactly 3,000 miles away from the Bone Gully. It was said that this was the town closest to the gully on the Bone mainland. The town did not have a name, so it could only be called Nameless. It was dilapidated and barren, with only a few dozen households. Moreover, most of the residents were old, weak, sick, or disabled, because those who could leave had already left. However, even so, it still had a small square. There was a lotus flower blooming on the square. That lotus flower gave the entire town a sense of vitality and Buddha's will. At this moment, Sumo, dressed in green, stood beside the lotus flower in silence. However, he felt that there was something special about that lotus flower. Because compared to the lotus flower in White Lotus Town, it seemed to have a stamen. That's right. That lotus flower only had petals, but no stamen. However, it still emitted a fragrance and brilliance. Sumo was puzzled. This was already the 7th day since the destruction of the Wanhuang Temple. Everything in the southern region of the Bone mainland was returning to peace. Sumo was also preparing to leave the Bone mainland. However, he had been heading south since the Wanhuang Mountain. This nameless town was already the 17th town he had passed. One town, one lotus. Sumo had to stand beside each lotus flower for a while. That was because he remembered the ancient painting in Mu Jinghong's cave abode. The beautiful man had once said that he crossed the sea by stepping on lotuses. Many things about lotuses were appearing in Sumo's world. Over the past few days, Sumo had been regretting it. That was because he had forgotten to ask the mute master what he had said for the first time: ashes to ashes, dust to dust, nothingness to nothingness, nothingness to nothingness. 10,000 years of admiring the mortal world, a lifetime of white bones. What did those words mean? That was because those words had also appeared in Mu Jinghong's ancient painting. Unfortunately, when the mute master explained to Sumo, Sumo had forgotten to ask. However, there were many things that did not need to be asked. For example, time would give the answer to the Holy Wheel Patriarch. Sumo believed that everything would have an answer. Sumo headed south in order to leave the Bone continent. The last jade slip Guan Xiong gave him was actually a map. It was a map of another continent. The other continent was called the Chaos God Continent. The Chaotic Gods Continent was the place Sumo wanted to explore. Crossing the Heaven Trench would lead them to the Chaotic Gods Continent. During these 7 days, Sumo only wanted to look at the white bones again and digest everything that happened in Immortal Temple. That was why she was practically walking. After looking at the strange lotus, Sumo walked towards a door in the town. It was a tavern. In fact, Sumo was also a little curious. How could there be a tavern in such a barren town? The tavern was not big, only 2 square feet. Inside, there were only 2 old tables. One of the tables even had a leg made of stones. However, the tavern was spotless. The entire tavern was filled with the fragrance of wine. There was a back room in the tavern, but no one else was there. "Waiter, serve the wine." Sumo sat down at the table with the missing leg and called out, "Cough, cough." At this time, the curtains of the back room were lifted, and an old woman walked out. The old woman wore a cloth dress and had a head full of white hair. She carried an ancient jar and coughed softly. Young man, a rare guest, a rare guest." The old woman glanced at Sumo. A glimmer of light flashed through her originally dim yellow eyes. "Someone finally came to this tavern." "Oh." Sumo also glanced at the old woman and couldn't help but smile faintly. "Granny, does this place only have a guest after a long time? This is my first time here." The old woman cracked a smile. She was actually missing 2 front teeth. There is no one else in the town, so everyone who comes is a rare and honored guest. No matter how many times you come, this old woman will treat you well. Saying this, the old woman placed the ancient jar on the table. Without waiting for Sumo to order, she turned around and brought 2 side dishes. This place is poor, so there is no need to order. Just these 2 dishes. The old woman's face was full of wrinkles. Of the 2 side dishes, one was white and similar to lotus root. The other was black, which Sumo didn't know. However, the color of the 2 dishes was good and very fresh. The old woman sat down and then opened the clay seal of the wine jar. In an instant, the wine fragrance spread in all directions, refreshing the mind. At that moment, Sumo's eyes flashed with a hint of excitement. Just the wine fragrance alone was already intoxicating. How could there be such good wine in this dilapidated town? The corner of Sumo's mouth couldn't help but curve. The old woman took 2 big bowls. Then, she filled both bowls, handed one bowl to Sumo, and took the other one for herself. Young man, there is no one in the town. My tavern won't be able to stay open for much longer. It's fate that you're here today. This old woman will accompany you to drink this jar of old wine. I won't charge you for the wine. How about it? Hee. Sumo nodded with a smile. Good. However, Sumo felt that this was a very strange town, and the old woman in front of her was also a very strange old woman. The old woman raised the wine cup. Clang, Sumo also raised the wine cup. The old and the young touched each other lightly. Then, they raised their heads and drank to their heart's content. The old woman's drinking was actually not the slightest bit inferior to Sumo's. The wine fragrance was intoxicating. Sumo felt that any kind of wine she had ever drunk could not compare to this bowl. What kind of wine was that? Sumo's heart shook. After walking the bones for 100 years, Sumo had also drunk a lot of wine. However, this bowl of wine was definitely different. It was not ordinary wine at all. However, the old woman in front of her was immortal. Old woman, what kind of wine is this? Sumo asked. What kind of wine? The old woman sighed and then shook her head. I don't remember. It's been too long. There used to be a name, but I really forgot it. Oh? Sumo asked again. Old woman, how old are you? It's the same. It's been too long. I don't remember. The old woman filled Sumo's and her wine cup again. The old woman's words sounded like a perfunctory reply. However, Sumo could feel a trace of disappointment in the old woman's voice. It was not a perfunctory reply, but the truest expression. The old woman was not immortal. Sumo's eyes focused. There was a kind of eye technique in 7th Senior Sister's inheritance. It could see the true appearance of a human demon. Even if one changed their appearance, they could still see through it. Moreover, as one's cultivation increased, the eye technique would become more powerful. However, in Sumo's eyes, the old woman with white hair was still reflected. He could not see anything at all. Young man, let's have another bowl. Clang, the 2 of them clinked their bowls again, but Sumo only drank half of it, because he felt that his Dan-si had instantly turned into a huge wave. The bowl just now had actually completely turned into a stream of air. It was like a wave of immortal chi that went straight to his limbs and bones. That bowl of wine filled Sumo's Dan-si to the brim. It should be known that Sumo had reached the great perfection of the soul transformation realm, but he had not broken through in 100 years. Although it was too normal for a soul transformation realm cultivator to not break through in 100 years, Sumo was not an ordinary person. At that moment, his Dan-si surged. Breaking through to the deity tribulation? Sumo's heart shook. The old woman's expression did not change as she drank the wine in one gulp. Chapter 232. The Nameless Town, the Nameless Immortal Wine. Sumo had not finished his 2 bowls of wine, but his Dan-si was already churning. The spiritual energy contained in the wine could actually help Sumo ascend to the deity tribulation stage. Hi! The old granny had finished her second bowl. She wiped her mouth with her sleeve, looking very refreshed. What's wrong? Young man, you can't drink any more? The old granny said with a smile. Hee hee. Sumo secretly used the unwithering art and directed all the spiritual energy into his Dan-si. At the same time, the skeleton immortal root in his Dan-si shone brightly. The nine-dragon deity platform also shone slightly. All of this helped Sumo stabilize his Dan-si. This wine must not be wasted. Sumo tilted his head back and drank the rest of the wine. Whoosh, his Dan-si surged again. But this time, Sumo was prepared. Once again, he guided spiritual energy into his body. His unwithering art had already begun to circulate. Granny, good wine, Sumo praised. Seeing Sumo drink 2 bowls of wine, the old granny could not help but nod. Young man, the wine in this small tavern is very strong. It's really good that you can drink 2 bowls in a row. The old granny said with a smile. Come, eat a few mouthfuls to suppress the wine. With that, the old granny ate 2 mouthfuls, and Sumo also took 2 dishes. The white dishes were fragrant and sweet, as if they were made of glutinous rice, but more chewy. The black dishes were slightly spicy, but more chewy like meat tendons. Sumo tasted 2 mouthfuls. The taste was not bad, but she did not know whether it was meat or vegetable. Just 2 mouthfuls of the dishes had indeed calmed the waves in Sumo's Dan-si a little. How is it? The old granny said, this is all made by me. Nowadays, there are not many people who can taste this old granny's cooking. Very good. Sumo said, Junior, thank you for your hospitality, Granny. The old granny laughed, then poured more wine for Sumo and herself. Young man, you're really straightforward. This barren town is incomparably desolate. Aren't you afraid that my wine and dishes are poisoned? Huh. Sumo was slightly taken aback, and then she couldn't help but smile. Granny bestowing wine and dishes is this junior's blessing. Even if it's poisonous, this junior will still drink a few bowls and eat a few mouthfuls. Heh heh heh. The old granny laughed happily. At the same time, a hint of disappointment flashed across her eyes. How many years had it been since anyone had entered her tavern? How many years had it been since anyone had drunk her immortal wine? Young man, you really know how to talk. The old lady was pleased. The wine was immortal wine, and the dishes were dragon tendons and dragon meat. This meal is Granny's farewell for you. Being able to enter my tavern is a great fortune. Although the old lady didn't say anything, it was obvious that she wasn't an ordinary person. Thank you, Granny, Sumo said hurriedly. Sumo didn't ask any more questions, because he could sense that this granny before him definitely had a story of her own. There was wine and stories. Sumo's trip was definitely worthwhile. No one has come to this town for tens of thousands of years. The old lady said, You're the first guest in tens of thousands of years. As for how many tens of thousands of years, I really don't remember. Sumo nodded. Granny, it must be tough for you to be alone. Tough? The old lady nodded with a bitter smile, then shook her head. At that moment, even she didn't know if it was tough or not. Come, drink another sip with Granny. Just a small sip will do. You won't be able to handle this wine. The 2 of them drank a mouthful each. The old lady looked at Sumo and asked, Young man, you came from North Town. If you go south, it'll be desolate. You're going to leave the Bone Continent, right? You're going to the Sky Ravine, right? Granny, that's right. At this moment, Sumo didn't need to hide anything from this old lady, because her intuition told her that this granny was definitely an almighty. Moreover, she was a hidden expert that was absolutely unfathomable. Therefore, being honest was the best way to deal with it. If the old lady wanted to harm Sumo, she wouldn't need to waste any effort. You're called Sumo, the granny said. Sumo was surprised that the granny knew her name. Granny, you know me? Hee hee. The granny laughed. I didn't know you at first. However, 7 days ago, you were on the 1,000 Desolation Mountain. That love monk used 3,000 lotuses to suppress demons. So I took a casual glance and eavesdropped on them. That's why I know your name is Sumo. Hiss, Sumo couldn't help but take a deep breath in her heart. He casually glanced around and listened to their conversation. Just what kind of person was this old granny? Could there be such an expert on the Bone Continent? Above the divine tribulation? Didn't Guan Xiong say that there were no Undying Realm experts on the Bone Continent? The old lady saw Sumo's confusion and said with a smile, I'm not a bone man. I'm going to leave. Because the person I'm waiting for won't come looking for me. He's gone. Sigh, the old lady seemed lost as she finished her bowl of wine alone. Granny, please forgive me for my poor eyesight. Sumo stood up and bowed respectfully to the granny. What expert? I'm just a bitter person. The granny motioned for Sumo to sit down. Sumo sat down. Originally, I was planning to drink this jar of wine alone at sunset today and then leave. I didn't expect you to come here. It must be fate. So, Granny wants to chat with you. All right. Sumo replied with a smile. Then, he filled the granny's bowl. Sumo, where are you going after leaving the Bone Continent? The granny asked. The Chaotic Gods Continent. Sumo said. The Chaotic Gods Continent? The granny laughed. The Chaotic Gods Continent is indeed an interesting place. That continent is really chaotic. However, the Chaotic Gods Continent is a good place to train. It's much better than the Bone Continent. The granny muttered to herself. You're going to the Chaotic Gods Continent to look for someone, right? The granny said with a faint smile. Sumo was stunned. In fact, he didn't know where to go to the Chaotic Gods Continent. Now, it didn't matter where Sumo went. Fortunately, Guan Xiong had given him a map, so he went there. Moreover, didn't Guan Xiong ask Sumo to save him? Looking for someone seemed to be the right thing to do. However, Sumo sensed something else from the granny's expression. The granny looked at Sumo in surprise. Then, she smiled lovingly. Sumo, aren't you the love monk? Is there a reincarnation cycle? Will you meet him? Sumo finally understood what the granny meant. Sumo, it's the right thing to look for him. The granny nodded. It's better to look for him than to wait. I've been waiting here for tens of thousands of years. 7 days ago, I caught a glimpse of him from afar. As it turns out, we're only 10,000 miles apart. But he's gone again. I won't wait for him, because he's never thought of looking for me. The granny was on the verge of tears. Granny! Sumo didn't quite understand the granny's words. She wanted to comfort her, but didn't know what to say. The granny controlled her emotions. Sumo, do you know who I am? Of course, Sumo shook her head. Chapter 233. Sumo, I'm a vixen. After saying that, the old granny actually laughed hysterically, but there was too much sadness in her laughter. Vixen? Sumo was stunned at first, but she suddenly remembered the play that the children in White Lotus Town put on. In that play there was a vixen. However, Sumo didn't know if that play was real or fake, or if it was the truth. At the same time, she thought about what the old granny said just now, and saw the person from afar 7 days ago. They were only 10,000 miles apart, but the person she was waiting for left. Sumo instantly understood. Granny, could it be that the person you were waiting for is the Mute Master? Sumo asked. The granny smiled bitterly and nodded. That's right. In this life, he practiced silent meditation and is indeed called Mute Master. I waited for him for 10,000 years on the White Bone Land. It's a pity. The granny didn't say anything else and only sighed. Sumo understood that the granny meant that the Mute Master didn't come to find her. Sumo, you should have heard of the various legends about the love monk on the White Bone Land, right? The granny asked. I've heard a little. Sumo smiled. Is it because children don't want to play the vixen during games? The granny laughed self-mockingly. Sumo shook her head and smiled bitterly, but didn't reply. It seemed like a similar scene had happened in the nameless town as well. The truth. The truth? The truth. The granny said 3 truths in a row, but the tone of each one was different. There was mockery, doubt, and helplessness. Granny, what is the truth? Sumo couldn't help but ask. The truth. The granny looked at Sumo and smiled faintly. Then, she raised the bowl of wine and signaled Sumo to drink with her. The two of them drank from each other's mouth. Sumo didn't dare to drink too much, but the bowl of wine was gone again. Then, the granny sighed. Sumo, you're still young. Let me tell you, the world changes, and the affairs of the world are complicated. There are many things that you can't see clearly. Even if it's the same thing, if you look at it from different perspectives, the truth may be different. Do you understand? Sumo listened to his mother-in-law's words and nodded slightly. The granny was right. There might not be only one truth. The granny smiled. So, Sumo, the so-called truth in the world is what you believe. As long as you believe, it's the truth. Hearing the granny's words, Sumo was stunned. Boom! In an instant, something seemed to explode in Sumo's mind. Like a bright light, it fiercely blasted open the endless darkness. The mute man had once said that Sumo had doubts in his heart. This was because Sumo didn't understand the actions of Windmill's senior brothers and sisters. He didn't understand Mu Jinghong's choice either. He also questioned why Bai Lai hid so many things from him. Even Guan Xiong, even though they had known each other for 100 years, Sumo was still unwilling to tell him many things. Because Sumo always had a grudge. Because Sumo always wondered if what he saw was the truth. This mentality even affected the progress of his cultivation. 7 days ago, Master Mute said, "Summer insects cannot talk about ice." This made Sumo realize his shortcomings. However, it was not enough to resolve the knot in his heart. Otherwise, Sumo wouldn't have to walk for another 7 days in the southern region of White Bones. He still couldn't understand everything about White Bones. The so-called truth was what you believed in your heart. The granny's words enlightened Sumo. Regardless of whether he lied or not, or whether he hid or not, could it be that the senior brothers and senior sisters of Windmill did not treat him well? Did Xiong, and Xiong not love him? Did Xiong, Bai Lai, and Guan Xiong not care about him? They never did. On the contrary, without those people, Sumo wouldn't be where he was today. The price that Mu Jinghong and the Windwheel children paid was their lives. Previously, Sumo just couldn't understand why they hid it from him and lied to him. Why didn't they let him choose? Sumo just wanted to know the truth. Therefore, everything about 5 wheels became a pain in Sumo's heart. If he could, he didn't want to lose his cultivation. However, the granny's words made Sumo feel enlightened. That's right. What is the truth? The one you believe in is the truth. In fact, Sumo always believed that Windwheel children, Mu Jinghong, Bai Lai, and Guan Xiong did it for him. They never wanted to hurt him. Windwheel is my home. I will wait for you in Samsara. When Sumo scolded Bai Lai, he pretended to be crazy and didn't say anything. Although Guan Xiong didn't tell Sumo many things in the past 100 years, he always accompanied him. Wasn't all this enough? Of course it was. Sumo had an answer in his heart. Whoosh, whoosh, Sumo's pill sea was once again rocked by great waves. The skeleton immortal root vibrated on the 9 dragons' immortal platform. Sumo used the everlasting art to guide and calm it down again. But Sumo knew that he was very, very close to the deity tribulation. He just had to wait for his final breakthrough. Hee hee. The granny smiled at Sumo. Good boy, you're really worth teaching. So quickly, you've understood the truth that Granny took tens of thousands of years to understand. But don't worry. It's just a deity tribulation, a small matter. How can I not give you a chance when you meet me? You should know that the heaven chasm can't be crossed unless it's a deity tribulation. The granny seemed to know the situation in Sumo's body clearly. Although the love monk gave you a lotus petal, it's not foolproof. He planted 3,000 lotuses, but he only gave you one petal. How stingy. As she spoke, the granny opened one hand. There was a lotus stamen in her palm. 3,000 Buddha lotuses suppress demons, but only one has no stamen. Because I killed the lamplighter of this town. That lotus stamen is in my hand. That night I was the one who lit up the Buddha lamp with a light touch. The granny laughed hysterically again. Sumo finally understood why the lotus in this town had no heart. But why did you do that, granny? Sumo asked. Hee. The granny laughed bitterly. The 3,000 Buddha lotuses were actually in the eyes of the love monk. I hoped to break one lotus heart, and he might come to find me. Unfortunately, another pity. Sumo understood that the mute master did not come. So I'll refine this lotus stamen and give it to you. The granny smiled. Then, a purple flame ignited in her palm. The stamen of the lotus was instantly refined into a lotus platform in her hand. But the lotus petals on the platform were only illusions. Sumo, the heaven trench is extremely dangerous. With this lotus platform, you can use the lotus petals that the love monk gave you as a sail. It's absolutely safe. You can reach the chaotic god's continent in no time. The granny placed the lotus platform in Sumo's hand. At the same time, it's also a defensive artifact. Thank you, granny. Sumo took the lotus platform. This was what he needed. Come. Let's drink another bowl. The granny filled a bowl of wine for both Sumo and herself. Cheers. The granny laughed. This time, she did not say it was just a small sip. Sumo obeyed and drank the bowl straight down his throat. In an instant, he felt the world spinning. Ha ha ha. The granny's happy laughter sounded in Sumo's ears. Sumo, tomorrow is your god's tribulation. Take care. I'm leaving. A fox's cry pierced the sky. In the end, Sumo seemed to see a snow-white fox flying directly into the void. Chapter 234. That night, Sumo dreamt of the rolling waves of the sea, the ebb and flow of the tides. That night, Sumo dreamt of lotus petals dancing in the air, flowers coming and going. Endless fragrance of wine, accompanied by the fragrance of flowers. Endless fragrance of flowers accompanied by the waves of the sea. Sumo felt himself floating on the boundless sea, surrounded by fragrance. He saw that the skeleton on his 9-dragon immortal platform was already covered in a faint azure glow. At that moment, the skeleton no longer looked like a skeleton, but a person, because the azure glow filled the entire skeleton. But that person's features were unclear. The immortal root changed, the realm increased. But at that moment, Sumo was not clear-headed. He only felt as if he had entered a different world. Everything he felt and knew was different. At that moment, it was as if he had ascended from the human world to the immortal world. That feeling was indescribably wonderful. Divine tribulation realm? Sumo felt as if he was floating. But suddenly, the pill sea in his dreams surged with great waves. In the air, the first bolt of lightning struck down. Boom, crack, that bolt illuminated the entire pill sea. At the same time, its power seemed to want to split the pill sea in half. Whoosh, as the lightning fell, great waves swept up the sky, at least 100 jong high. Boom, crack, boom, thunder rumbled incessantly. In the air above the pill sea, several bolts of lightning flashed. In the pill sea, great waves surged, each higher than the last. But now, the white bone immortal root was unmoving. Boom! At that moment, a bolt of lightning struck the top of the skeleton's head. But the skeleton was as steady as before. In fact, the azure glow on its body was even brighter. Resisting the lightning tribulation. At that moment, Sumo understood something. Boom, crack, boom, 1 bolt, 2 bolts, 3 bolts, a total of 19 bolts of lightning, each stronger than the last. But each time, it could do nothing to the white skeleton. The white skeleton did not budge in the slightest. In fact, its movements did not change at all. It sat cross-legged, as steady as Mount Tai. If other divine tribulation cultivators saw this scene in Sumo's dream, they would most likely be shocked. Because it was too domineering. It was not the lightning tribulation that was domineering, but the skeleton immortal root. Divine tribulation, divine tribulation. Only with tribulation could one successfully ascend. Whether it was Feng Shi or Guan Xiong, both of them had experienced tribulations and broken through them. Deity tribulation was obviously a level higher than soul transformation. The most important reason was that their immortal roots had to be tempered by the Pill Sea God lightning. Those who could withstand the Elixir Sea divine lightning usually had a slim chance of survival before finally cultivating the divine tribulation Great Tao. Those who couldn't withstand the Elixir Sea divine lightning naturally couldn't advance. Moreover, there was only one chance to undergo the divine tribulation. Many soul transformation realm experts had prepared for hundreds or even thousands of years to ascend to the deity tribulation. However, even then, there was no guarantee that nothing would go wrong. Between the infinite worlds, countless mighty figures had died on the path of ascending to the deity tribulation. However, Sumo settled everything in her sleep with just a few bowls of wine. Sumo didn't even feel any pain. In his dreams, he was like an outsider. He watched it all happen, amazed at how it all happened. At that moment, Sumo really thought it was a dream. However, that dream lasted for an unknown period of time. Sumo's soul drifted. In the blink of an eye. In his dream, he only saw the color of the Elixir Sea gradually turn golden. The golden waves were like layers of wheat waves. Then, after an unknown period of time, on an early morning, it was drizzling and the autumn was slightly cool. Sumo slowly woke up on the table in the small tavern. It turned out that he had been bent over the table the entire time. That was really a good dream, a good sleep. Sumo frowned and composed himself. Then, he looked around him. He didn't know how long he had slept, but he saw that there was a thick layer of dust on the table where he was bent over. Sumo was stunned. Could it be that this nap of his actually took years to count? The wine jar on the table was already empty, the 2 plates of dragon meat and dragon tendons were also dried up, almost unrecognizable. How long did I sleep? Sumo muttered to himself. Then, Sumo stood up and walked out of the small tavern. As soon as he walked out of the small tavern, Sumo was instantly stunned. Because there was no small town outside the small tavern. It was clearly a piece of barren land. However, Sumo looked carefully again, and vaguely seemed to see the shadow of the small town in the past. However, this small town had long been barren, or it should be said that it had become an almost unrecognizable ruin. All the houses had collapsed. Endless weeds spread throughout the entire village. There was absolutely no sign of human habitation here. Sumo couldn't help but look in the direction of the small square. That place seemed to have experienced a great calamity, and had long been unrecognizable. If Sumo didn't still remember the location of the small square, he wouldn't dare to believe that it used to be a square. And the lotus on the square was no longer there. That hollow lotus, in fact, had completely withered not long after the grandmother left, because it had no stamen at all. And in this small town, after the grandmother left, all the townspeople either left or died. Sumo looked at everything in a daze, and then looked back at the small tavern behind him. Wow, boom, and at the moment when he looked back, the originally dilapidated tavern also collapsed with a loud bang, bringing with it clouds of dust and smoke. Hee. Sumo couldn't help but smile bitterly. It seemed that the small tavern had been waiting for him to wake up, or else it would have been long gone. Then, He looked at the small tavern again, and saw a few lines of extremely elegant handwriting in the smoke and dust. Destined to be with you, a dream of 1,000 years. Help you in your divine tribulation, see you again. Those lines didn't have a signature. But Sumo knew that it must have been left by the white-haired grandmother. Fox spirit? Thinking of the heaven fox that he saw when he was unconscious, Sumo couldn't help but ask himself, was that grandmother really a heaven fox? Of course, Sumo had heard of the legend of a heaven fox becoming an immortal. But there shouldn't be a demon clan in the White Bone Land. The Fox clan was the top existence in the demon clan. Divine tribulation. At this moment, Sumo really realized the changes in his Dan Sea. The golden waves sparkled under the sunlight. A skeleton made of green light. To be precise, it was not a skeleton, but a man made of green light, coiled on the Nine Dragons deity platform. A power more vast than the power of the soul-dissolving power filled Sumo's entire body. Divine tribulation. Sumo took a deep breath. Everything came so easily for him. From a child cultivator to a divine tribulation, there was almost no obstruction. Sumo, what virtue or ability did he have to deserve such favor? Sumo's gaze became even more distant. Had it been more than 1,000 years? Sumo smiled bitterly and shook his head. But now, Sumo's mentality was different. What that fox grandmother gave Sumo was not only a divine tribulation, but also an epiphany. Sumo felt more free and at ease, and there was less of a fetter. Everything about the White Bone Land was over. Sumo's heart was filled with a strange expectation for reincarnation. So, without much hesitation, Sumo moved and went straight to the gutter in the south. Chapter 235. The Chaotic Gods continent was located in the northernmost part of the Pure Land. From a bird's-eye view, the Chaos Gods continent was also a ring-shaped third of the continent's surface. However, it was definitely not a human lying on its side. It was a normal continent. In fact, there were only 3 complete continents in the periphery of the Pure Land world. White Bones, Chaotic God, Ancient Shu. The 3 continents each occupied about 1/3 of the Pure Land's periphery. There was an endless chasm between them. There were many floating continents of different sizes in the ravine. Some had cultivators on them, and some didn't have any life at all. Those floating continents weren't the main body of the Pure Land, but more like fragments of a continent. If the White Bone, the Chaotic God, and the Ancient Shu were connected, they would form a ring. Within the ring, there was also a sky ditch. Further in the Heaven Trench was the bitter Samsara Sea. In the middle of the bitter Samsara Sea, there was an existence that was like a sea but not a sea, like a land but not a land. That was the center of the Pure Land. There was Tianfu above and 9 nether below. Tianfu and the 9 underworlds were both in the center of the Pure Land. It was the most mystical place in the Pure Land. However, many cultivators of the Pure Land couldn't reach it even after spending their entire life. The Chaotic Gods continent was also known as the Nomadic continent or the Spring and Autumn continent. That was because it was the most chaotic continent in the entire Pure Land. Sects stood in great numbers, and extraordinary people appeared frequently. The Chaotic Gods continent was a fertile land for adventuring cultivators. After all, anything could happen on the Chaotic Gods continent. This was the place where miracles and deaths were most likely to occur in the Pure Land. At the edge of the Chaotic Gods continent was an ancient city called the Forgotten City. This was the city closest to the northern gutter on the Chaos Gods continent. It was only 700 miles away from the Heaven Trench. At this distance, not even a blade of grass would grow on the White Bone continent. However, there was a city on the Chaotic Gods continent. Legend has it that this place used to be a natural ravine crossing. The north crossing of the Chaos Gods continent faced the Heaven Trench and the Bone continent. However, in the eyes of the people from the Chaotic Gods continent, the Bone continent was considered a low-level continent. Therefore, this crossing was not very lively. Occasionally, there were cultivators who came to hunt or search for treasures in the sky ditch. However, Forgotten City was still an important city in the north of the chaotic gods continent. The reason for that was because there were 3 enormous teleportation formations in the city. They could transport cultivators directly to the central region of the Chaos Gods continent, or to other places along the way. It was almost midnight. However, the forgotten capital city was bustling with noise and excitement. This was a city that never slept all year round. As long as you wanted it, it could be said to have everything inside. There was an inn in Wangdu City called the Gathering Gold Inn. That was the biggest inn in the Forgotten City. Because it was not only an inn, it was also a casino. There were all kinds of gambling tools and methods in the casino. In this gold gathering inn, as long as you wanted to bet, you could bet on anything. The entire first floor of the inn was the casino. At this time, there was a man in green clothes walking slowly in the middle of the casino. He held the gold gathering inn's unique chips in his hand, but they were not many. However, he would occasionally place a few bets, and the amount of bets he placed was not large. However, the only strange thing was that he seemed to have never lost. No matter what kind of bet it was, he was the one who won. In the beginning, the azure-robed man did not attract much attention. However, on the second floor of the Forgotten Capital Inn, there were 2 people in charge of the casino who gradually noticed the azure-robed man. Of the 2 people in charge, one was in a red robe, the other in a green robe. They both looked like middle-aged men. A tea table was placed in front of the 2 people. The 2 of them were sipping tea. At the same time, they were observing the casino on the first floor. They were 2 cultivators at the peak of the nascent soul realm. Mid-stage of the nascent soul realm. They only bet 3 chips each time, but they never lose. At this time, the man in the green robe looked at the azure-robed cultivator and said, "That azure-robed cultivator seems a little interesting. He's probably just lucky and good at scheming." The man in the red robe did not think much of it. His focus did not seem to be on the azure-robed cultivator. Luck? The man in the green robe took a sip of tea and laughed. "Brother Doe, did you notice? Do you know how many times that azure-robed cultivator has won?" "How many times?" The man in the red robe looked at the man in the green robe. "A total of 27 times. The man in the green robe smiled bitterly. "If he didn't only bet 3 chips each time, I'm afraid he would have won a lot by now. Everyone's spirit stones here will soon be his." Brother Doe focused his gaze on the azure-robed cultivator. At this time, the azure-robed cultivator was standing next to a gambling table. That gambling table was the simplest form of shaking dice and betting on big or small. In fact, for a cultivator, they could choose any number of points on the die. However, the dice of the gold gathering inn were special and could not be controlled by the cultivator's spiritual power. At the same time, the people who shook the dice were all mortals. However, behind these mortals, there were extremely powerful cultivators overseeing. For example, the peak of the nascent soul realm on the second floor was only a second-rate character in this gold gathering inn. As long as it was not a soul transformation expert, they could deal with it. If a soul transformation expert came, there would naturally be people monitoring them. Therefore, although the people who came here to gamble were all cultivators, almost no one dared to cheat. First, there was no need, and second, they would be beaten to death. The gold gathering inn also did not play tricks in the dark. Therefore, winning countless spirit stones here was really a matter of luck and calculation. More than anything, it was a kind of pleasure. Big, small, big. As long as there was a gambling place, there would be people shouting. Even if the entire gambling house was filled with cultivators, and half of them were nascent soul realm cultivators. However, the atmosphere was foul and not much different from that of mortals. This was the chaotic gods continent. Core formation cultivators were everywhere, and nascent soul realm cultivators were as numerous as dogs. The Foundation establishment cultivators here were like skeletons of mortals. This was because almost everyone on the chaotic gods continent was a cultivator. At this time, the azure-robed cultivator casually threw 3 chips on the table. Each chip was worth 100 mid-grade spirit stones. At the nascent soul realm, that was not a large amount. What he bet was small. Open. The dealer saw that everyone had bet enough and suddenly opened the cup. 1, 2, 3 small. The dealer called and began to collect the chip. The cultivators who bet lost more and won less. However, coincidentally, the azure-robed cultivator won again. Although he only had 3 chips, he had won close to 100 chips in his storage bag. The azure-robed cultivator laughed, seemingly a bit bored. This was because he had won 33 times in a row. The number given by the green-robed manager on the second floor was actually not accurate. The azure-robed cultivator had played all the games in the entire gambling house and won all of them. At this time, the azure-robed cultivator no longer bet. Instead, he went straight to the counter and exchanged all his chips for mid-grade spirit stones. He had exchanged over 10,000 mid-grade spirit stones. He had made a small fortune. The cultivator in charge of the exchange was also a bit surprised. The 2 managers on the second floor couldn't help but look at each other. The azure-robed cultivator put away the spirit stones and smiled faintly. He thought to himself, second senior brother's inheritance is really not bad. He wins every bet, truly invincible. Chapter 236. The dream lasted for 1,000 years, and when she woke up, her past was like smoke. After leaving Wuming Town, Sumo crossed the sky ditch on the lotus throne. The lotus pistils were the boats, and the petals were the sails. The sky ditch was indeed very dangerous. There were black holes and whirlpools everywhere. Sumo even saw a few giant beasts lurking in the sky ditch. When the wild beasts came out to look for food, they also looked at Sumo's lotus throne. 2 of them were a 2-headed evil dragon and a 2-winged giant wolf. They seemed to want to touch the light of the lotus throne. However, the little white pig, who was in Sumo's arms, poked his head out lazily. Then, the little fellow grinned at the 2 evil beasts. The 2 ferocious beasts immediately turned around and ran. Humph! The little white pig was very proud of himself. The dragon-elephant soul-eating beast was a beast from the Pure Land. Who would dare to touch it? The little white pig was very excited as it looked at the gutter. If it weren't for Sumo, he would have flown 1 round in the sky ditch before coming back. At the same time, Sumo wondered why this guy didn't grow up. I slept for 1,000 years, but the little white pig is still the little white pig. Just like that, the journey was more daunting than dangerous. However, Sumo flew for half a month before he saw the chaotic gods continent. If it weren't for the map that Guan Xiong gave him, Sumo would have thought that he was lost. In fact, the straight-line distance between the White Bones continent and the chaotic gods continent was only a few 100,000 miles. However, he had to avoid risks and take many detours, so it wasn't easy to get there. The Forgotten City was the first city that Sumo came to on the chaotic gods continent. He purposely suppressed his own cultivation. Originally, Sumo could have used 7th Senior Sister's inheritance to change his face, but he didn't think it was necessary. Because no one on the chaotic gods continent knew him, except for Guan Xiong. Sumo stayed in the Forgotten City for 2 days and took a look at the local customs. The cultivators on the chaotic gods continent were much more advanced than those on the White Bones continent. Core formation and nascent soul cultivators could be seen everywhere, and there were quite a few soul transformation cultivators in this small city. At the same time, it was more lively here. The Forgotten Capital City was neither big nor small, but there were many people here. Sumo had come to the God of Chaos to explore. Of course, he also wanted to look for Guan Xiong. But on the map that Guan Xiong gave him, there was no indication of his position. Sumo only knew that Guan Xiong was the descendant of the immortal illusionary realm, but she knew nothing about the power behind him. Where can I find Guanxiong? On second thought, Sumo's own dream of 1,000 years. If Guan Xiongzhen had waited for him to save him, he would have been long dead. However, Sumo could guarantee that Guan Xiong would not die, nor would he really have his little bird cut. As a result, Sumo was relatively carefree when she first arrived on the Chaos God's continent. Otherwise, he wouldn't be loitering around the gold-gathering inn's casino. After exchanging the spirit stones, Sumo went straight to her bedroom on the 3rd floor. However, she ran into a green-robed cultivator on the 2nd floor. The green-robed cultivator was one of the managers of the casino. He smiled and cupped his fists at Sumo. "Greetings, fellow Taoist. I am Fu Wanqing, a small steward of this inn." Sumo cupped his fists in return. "I am Sumo. Greetings, fellow Taoist Fu. May I know what advice you have for me?" Fu Wanqing smiled and said, "What advice do you have? However, when I was on the 2nd floor, I saw that fellow Taoist Su had a winning streak. However, you only bet 3 chips each time. You are not arrogant nor greedy. I am very impressed. I wonder if you would like to have a drink or two with me. Let's get to know each other." Sumo laughed. "Fellow Taoist, thank you for your hospitality. Sumo will gladly accept." In Sumo's eyes, a peak nascent soul cultivator was an ordinary cultivator. However, Sumo had just arrived on the Chaos God's continent. He only had a map, so of course he couldn't. Getting to know a local cultivator would definitely be beneficial. That was why Sumo wouldn't refuse an invitation like this. Thus, Fu Wanqing led Sumo to a private room on the 2nd floor. A banquet had already been prepared. The red-robed senior martial brother Do was already inside. Seeing that Fu Wanqing had invited Sumo, senior martial brother Do stood up and cupped his fist. "I am Do Tianlu. Welcome, fellow Taoist." Sumo greets fellow Taoist Do. Sumo returned the greeting. The 3 of them took their seat. The dishes on the table were filled with the delicacies of the forgotten capital. Fu Wanqing poured wine for all 3 of them. "This is our first meeting. Let me toast first." Fu Wanqing drank his cup first. Sumo didn't act pretentious. She raised her cup and downed it. Do Tianlu followed suit and drank his cup. After drinking, the relationship between the 3 of them became a little closer. "Brother Su, which sect are you from?" Fu Wanqing asked as he invited Sumo to eat. He, a peak nascent soul cultivator, addressed Sumo as brother, giving Sumo plenty of face. "I am a wandering cultivator. I don't belong to any sect, nor do I have a fixed residence. However, I've only entered this place because of my travels," Sumo said. Fu Wanqing and Do Tianlu nodded. On the chaotic god's continent, there were many wandering cultivators. Moreover, they didn't belong to any sect, and each had their own opportunities. It was because these wandering cultivators traveled the chaotic god's continent that the continent was also known as the nomadic continent. The meaning was that there were many wandering cultivators, and they were like nomads. Sumo's answer was spot on. "Brother Su, can you tell me how you managed to win every bet?" Fu Wanqing asked with a smile. At this time, Do Tianlu also looked at Sumo curiously. It wasn't a big deal that Sumo had won 10,000 spirit stones. More importantly, they wanted to know how Sumo managed to win so many times without losing. They had been in charge of the Gathering Gold Casino for several decades. Winning and losing was a normal thing. It was common for people to win a lot in the end. However, Sumo had won more than 30 times in a row using various methods. "Oh!" Hearing Fu Wanqing's question, Sumo couldn't help but laugh. "Excuse me, brothers. Actually, there's no secret. It's just that I can predict the outcome of every bet." Predict the outcome of a bet? Fu Wanqing and Do Tianlu were shocked. What kind of ability was that? "Brother Su, you're saying that you can predict the outcome of every bet? Then you bet or choose, right?" Fu Wanqing asked. He. Sumo laughed. You can say that. Originally, I didn't really trust my intuition, but after trying it today, I'm sure it's accurate. To tell you the truth, I won a total of 33 rounds in a row today, and they were all at different tables. I didn't mean to win the spirit stones. I just wanted to verify my guess. Sumo's words were not false at all. That was the ability of second senior brother. As long as it was a bet, second senior brother had never lost. That was because second senior brother had a natural ability to predict the outcome of a bet. Back then, sixth senior brother Lu Tianzhan had lost to second senior brother Du Shuxing countless times. When Sumo first entered the casino, he didn't feel anything special. However, later on, he discovered that he had a super long ability. For Sumo, that ability was just for fun at the moment and didn't have much practical meaning. Chapter 237. The ability to predict the outcome of a bet. Fu Wanqing and Dou Tianlu couldn't help but look at each other when they heard this. In their eyes, Sumo was only a mid-nascent soul cultivator. Did he really have such an ability? They were doubtful. Dou Tianlu smiled. Brother Su, it's not that we don't believe you. It's just that what you said is too unbelievable. I'm willing to bet with you. What do you think? Dou Tianlu took out a pigeon egg-sized, blood-red gem from his pocket. A blood spirit stone. It was an extremely rare item found only in the Chaotic Gods mainland. Although it was called a blood spirit stone, it was not actually a spirit stone. Instead, it was a natural treasure. A blood spirit stone was a material used to forge a deity-grade artifact. Brother Su, do you know what this is? Dou Tianlu asked. A blood spirit stone. Sumo smiled. Although he had never seen a blood spirit stone before, his sixth senior brother, Lu Tianzhan's inheritance had some knowledge about it. Brother Su, you have a good eye. Do you know how to forge artifacts as well? Dou Tianlu praised. This was because not every cultivator could recognize a blood spiritual stone. I only know a little. Sumo replied modestly. In fact, with his sixth senior brother's inheritance and his current realm, Sumo was definitely a master in forging artifacts. Brother Su, you are indeed talented. Dou Tianlu smiled. Today, let's use this blood spirit stone as a wager. Let's bet on the outcome. If Brother Su wins 4 rounds, I'll give this blood spirit stone to you. What do you think? When Sumo heard this, he could not help but smile. Brother Dou, you are very generous. You should know that I win every bet I make. Sumo, I don't deserve this. Sumo's words were half joking and half serious. Fu Wanqing and Dou Tianlu laughed at the same time. To be honest, they hoped that Sumo would win. After all, they had something to ask of Sumo. How do we bet? Sumo asked. Let's make it simple. Dice. Dou Tianlu said, in order to be fair, Shitty Fu will be the banker, but he won't place any bets. Both of us will place our bets back to back. Each round had a total of 7 cups, and whoever won the most would be the winner. We can just write our bets on the jade slip. All right. We'll do as Brother Dou says. Sumo understood and nodded in agreement. Fu Wanqing lightly clapped his hands, and a servant brought over a dice shaking cup. There were a total of 21 dice, 7 shaking cups, and 14 blank jade slip. Fu Wanqing looked at Sumo and Dou Tianlu and said with a smile, both of you know the rules. In a while, you're absolutely not allowed to use your spiritual sense to probe, otherwise it won't count. That was the rule of the Chaos Gods continent. Otherwise, it wouldn't be a matter of luck or skill, but rather a matter of cultivation level. Sumo and Dou Tianlu both nodded. All right. Begin. Goodbye. Fu Wanqing spread his arms. 7 shaking cups flew up at the same time. 21 dice flew into the shaking cup. Each cup contained 3 dice. Whoosh, whoosh. Fu Wanqing's hands didn't even touch the shaking cups, but the 7 shaking cups danced up and down in a beautiful and rhythmic manner. It was like butterflies flying and hundreds of birds chirping. Even if he was a nascent soul cultivator, to be able to do something like this was a rare sight. Sumo silently nodded as she watched. Because this meant that Fu Wanqing could probably control 7 treasures at the same time. His skill was definitely not ordinary. At this time, Dou Tianlu's eyes were closed, as if he was concentrating on listening to the sound of the dice rolling in the shaking cups. This was a common method used by many skilled gamblers. However, it was easy to listen to 1 cup, but 7 cups in a row was a mess. How could they tell? Whoosh, whoosh. Fu Wanqing controlled the shaking cups with ease, and then suddenly dropped them. The 7 shaking cups landed on the table almost at the same time, forming a straight line. The shaking of the cups really showed his skill. Sumo nodded with a smile. Dou Tianlu took a deep breath and nodded as well. Both of you, please place your bets. From south to north, in order. Fu Wanqing smiled, and at the same time, he pointed at the order of the 7 cups. Sumo and Dou Tianlu each picked up a jade slip, recorded their 7 bets, and then gave them to Fu Wanqing. There were a total of 7 rounds, and each round had 7 cups. In the 7 cups, whoever placed the most bets would win. After the 2 handed over their jade slips, Fu Wanqing waved his hand, and all 7 cups were opened. Big, small, small, big, 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 Fu Wanqing said. When the results came out, Dou Tianlu's lips curled up, because he knew that he had placed all 7 bets correctly. No matter how good Sumo was, it could only be a draw. However, Sumo's expression was very calm, and nothing could be seen. Fu Wanqing didn't look at the 2 jade slips either. Instead, he raised the cups again. Whoosh, whoosh, just like before, the 7 cups danced up and down. A moment later, they suddenly dropped. Sumo still looked very calm, while Dou Tianlu listened very attentively each time. The 2 once again picked up a new jade slip, and recorded their bets inside. Then, Fu Wanqing opened the cups. Small, 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 big, big, small. When the results came out, Dou Tianlu couldn't help but look at Sumo. Because, he once again hit the jackpot. In terms of gambling skills, Dou Tianlu was very confident. In the entire Forgotten Capital, he could easily rank in the top 3. However, Sumo only smiled faintly. In short, Fu Wanqing raised the cups 4 times and opened them 4 times. Sumo and Dou Tianlu both recorded their jade slips 4 times. After the 4th time, Dou Tianlu looked at Sumo and smiled. Brother Su, I think we should open the jade slips. Dou Tianlu said. Because Dou Tianlu himself knew that his 28 bets were correct. Ha ha! Sumo also laughed. I think we should let Brother Fu finish the 7 times. At that time, it won't be too late to reveal it. Alright. Dou Tianlu was a straightforward person. Because, he was thinking that Sumo might also be correct. What if the winner couldn't be determined? So, Fu Wanqing once again raised the cup. The 5th round, the 6th round, the 7th round. A total of 7 by 7, 49 times. Recorded the jade slips, opened the cup. Everything was completed. Fu Wanqing looked at Sumo and Dou Tianlu and asked with a smile, "The 2 of you, what do you think of the battle? Brother Dou, what do you think?" If I remember correctly, 7 by 7, 49 cups, I should be correct. Dou Tianlu laughed. Although Fu Wanqing knew that Dou Tianlu's gambling skills were good, he was still shocked when he heard that he was correct. What suspense was there? What about Brother Su? Fu Wanqing asked Sumo. I should still win. Sumo laughed. Fu Wanqing became interested. Little brother, please look at Brother Dou's 7 jade slips. Sumo said. Okay. Fu Wanqing replied. Then, Fu Wanqing took out Dou Tianlu's 7 jade slips one by one. He instilled his divine sense, and it instantly appeared. Big, small, small, big, 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 big. Small, 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 big, 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 small. A total of 49 cups, and the result was correct? At that moment, Fu Wanqing couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. Because, although he was the one who shook the cup, he couldn't do it himself. Do Tianlu smiled. Brother Do, you're really amazing. Sumo sincerely praised. Because, if Sumo didn't have the second senior brother's inheritance, she would definitely not be able to do this. Brother Su, do you still have a chance of winning? Fu Wanqing laughed. Because it was already impossible to win. Of course. Sumo nodded with a smile. Fu Wanqing was stunned, then waved his hand, open. Fu Wanqing opened Sumo's 7 jade slips at the same time. The 7 jade slips shone brightly and immediately appeared. Chapter 238. The 7 jade slips each shone brilliantly. 7 projections appeared in the room in an instant. Before this, Do Tianlu had already won 49 cups, without a single mistake. In theory, Sumo had no chance of winning. The biggest miracle was a draw. Therefore, when Sumo confidently said that she would win, Fu Wanqing and Do Tianlu did not believe it. At that moment they even thought that Sumo was a little frivolous. However, when Sumo's 7 projections appeared, their faces changed abruptly. Because, no matter what, they did not expect that the situation would be like that. Sumo and Do Tianlu's gambling method was actually very simple. Without the banker, they were just competing among the idlers. Whoever won the most rounds would win. 3 dice. Big meant that the sum of the numbers was from 11 to 17, and small meant that the sum of the numbers was from 3 to 10. It was already a miracle that all the numbers were correct. However, looking at the results of Sumo's jade slips, it was simply a miracle of miracles. The first jade slip, big, respectively 3 points, 5 points, 3 points, small, respectively 1 point, 1 point, 3 points, small, respectively 2 points, 1 point, 4 points, large, respectively 4 points, 5 points, 6 points, large, respectively 4 points, 4 points, 4 points, 3 points, large, respectively 5 points, 3 points, 6 points, large, respectively 4 points, 6 points, 6 points. The second jade slip, small, respectively 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, small, respectively 1 o'clock, 1 o'clock, 3 o'clock, small, respectively 2 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 2 o'clock, small, respectively 3 o'clock, 3 o'clock, large, respectively 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, large, respectively 6 o'clock, 6 o'clock, small, respectively 1 o'clock, 1 o'clock. The third jade slip, the fourth jade slip, the fifth jade slip, and the sixth jade slip were all the same. Except for the last jade slip, the first 6 jade slips not only correctly guessed all the sizes, but also accurately wrote the specific number of each cup. On the 7th jade slip, in addition to the big and small numbers, there was also a sentence. Brother Do, all 49 rounds were correct. This was Sumo's prediction before the results were out. At this time, there were only 3 people in the room: Sumo, Fu Wanqing, and Do Tianlu, as well as 2 servants. This scene stunned all of them on the spot. Because this couldn't be called gambling, this was called divine divination. Everyone knew that Sumo could not cheat. That was because the jade slip was always placed beside Fu Wanqing. After opening the cup, it was impossible to change it. In fact, according to Sumo's true realm, if she really wanted to cheat, she could basically do this. However, Sumo didn't need to. Second senior brother's inheritance allowed him to foresee all of this. Everything that happened in the gambling house was within his expectations. After being stunned for a moment, Fu Wanqing and Do Tianlu applauded at the same time. "All right. Amazing," the two of them said in unison. For a moment, they couldn't find a better word to express their feelings. Within the forgotten capital, these two were considered important people. They had seen many chaotic God realm cultivators coming and going. Not to mention nascent soul realm cultivators, they even knew many soul transformation realm cultivators. However, this was the first time they had seen someone like Sumo. Divine divination. This round had almost exceeded the scope of a gamble. Because if you gamble, you might lose. However, the ability that Sumo displayed was clearly foresight. That couldn't be called a gamble. This was because the entire situation was under Sumo's control. She knew everything clearly. Brother Su, I concede defeat. Do Tianlu praised sincerely. He was sincerely convinced. At the same time, he handed the spiritual bloodstone to Sumo. You have to admit defeat. I hope Brother Su doesn't mind this wager. Sumo smiled and took the spiritual bloodstone. Then, she said, Brother Do, you're too kind. Actually, the gambling house just now was a draw. Because we only said to bet on the size, we didn't say to mark the number. This little brother was only acting on the spur of the moment, and it was somewhat superfluous. If I had said it clearly, Brother Do might have been able to do it. Sumo's words were very good. I'll accept this spiritual bloodstone. However, I have 2 soul-cultivating pills here. I hope you too will accept it. Consider it my meeting gift. As she spoke, Sumo flipped her hand and 2 soul-cultivating pills appeared in her palm. The soul-cultivating pill was red and had a medicinal fragrance. It was a peak nascent soul realm pill. It could help nascent soul realm cultivators in their soul transformation realm, but it wouldn't have a decisive effect. Even so, the soul-cultivating pill was definitely a good thing for nascent soul realm cultivators. Its value was even higher than the spiritual bloodstone. However, there were many pills of this level in Sumo's pill storage bottle. These were just some pills that Sumo had made in the past 100 years to familiarize herself with third senior brother's inheritance. Soul-cultivating pill. Fu Wanqing and Do Tianlu didn't expect Sumo to be so generous. Of course, they wouldn't stand on ceremony. Because it was indeed what they needed. Brother Su, do you also know alchemy? The reason why Fu Wanqing asked this was because if one didn't know alchemy, a nascent soul realm cultivator in the middle stage would never give a pill of this level as a gift. I only know a little. Sumo was modest again. However, after the gambling house, Fu Wanqing and Do Tianlu had a whole new level of respect for Sumo. She knew a little about refining weapons and alchemy. However, to what extent, it was not convenient for them to ask. However, they were full of confidence in Sumo's performance in the gambling house. Come, Brother Su, let me toast to you. Do Tianlu raised his cup. Please. Sumo raised her cup to greet the two. The 3 of them drank a cup together. Then, the 3 of them chatted and became familiar with each other. The atmosphere was much more lively than before. From their conversation, Sumo learned that these 2 were not only the managers of the Jujin Inn, but also the disciples of the Wangdu Mountain. The Wangdu Mountain was a medium-sized immortal sect in the northern region of the Chaotic Gods mainland. Therefore, Sumo gained a better understanding of the Wangdu city, and even the Chaotic Gods mainland. After 3 rounds of wine and 5 different dishes, Fu Wanqing and Do Tianlu looked at each other. They had something they needed Sumo's help with. However, they had only just met each other, so it wasn't appropriate for them to ask. Sumo could tell that the 2 had something to say, but she hesitated. Brothers, if there's anything you need, just say it. If I can be of help, I will definitely do my best. Sumo's words left her mouth. Fu Wanqing and Do Tianlu were a little embarrassed. Fu Wanqing smiled. Since Brother Su said so, it seems like we are lucky. To be honest, Brother Su, we do have something that we need your help with. Sumo smiled. What is it? A bet. Fu Wanqing said slowly as he looked at Suimo. Chapter 239. A bet? A must-win bet. What bet? Sumo smiled at Fu Wanqing and Do Tianlu, waiting for the rest of the story. Sigh. It's a long story. Fu Wanqing sighed. Brother Su, Perhaps you've heard of the chaotic gods' continent's southern region having 3 capitals? Southern region's 3 capitals? Suemo nodded. The jade scroll that Guan Xiong had given him did contain such a description. The so-called 3 capitals were the Forgotten City, the Dream City, and the Ghost City. These 3 ancient cities formed a triangle with a distance of 30,000 li between them. The Forgotten City was the northern crossing of the chaotic gods' continent, with 3 inter-regional transportation arrays, making transportation convenient. The Dream City was prosperous, known as the largest city in the southern region. The Ghost City was a strange city. It was widely recognized that the cultivators of the Ghost City were the most powerful and strange. There were also a few special ancient sects around the Ghost City. Thus, there was a saying in the southern region of the chaotic gods: travel in the Forgotten City, enjoy in the Dream City, cultivate in the Ghost City. It could be said that each of them had their own characteristic. What does the bet have to do with the 3 capitals of the southern region? Sumo asked. Ha ha! Fu Wanqing smiled bitterly. Brother Su, we cultivators pay the most attention to cultivation resources, spirit stones and treasures. The chaotic gods' continent is rich in all kinds of minerals. 3 months ago, a top-grade spirit stone mine was discovered in the center of the 3 capitals. Sumo was surprised. Even nascent soul transformation, and deity tribulation cultivators couldn't ignore top-grade spirit stone mines. 1 top-grade spirit stone was equivalent to 100 high-grade spirit stones, which was equivalent to 10,000 mid-grade spirit stones. Most importantly, for soul transformation realm and deity tribulation realm cultivators, only high-grade or best-grade spirit stones could provide them with some spiritual chi that they could directly absorb. Middle and lower-grade spirit stones no longer held any significance from the perspective of cultivation. Thus, a top-grade spirit stone mine, no matter how big or small, was enough to attract attention from all sides. The 3 capitals have disputes on how to mine and divide the spirit stone mine? Sumo immediately grasped the crux of the problem. That's right, Fu Wanqing said. Among the 3 capitals, in terms of strength, of course Ghost City is ranked first, and Wang City is the weakest. Therefore, at the beginning, my Wangdu City only proposed 20%, and Mengdu City and Guichan City would each get 40%. This division is reasonable. Sumo estimated that Forgotten Capital City had some self-awareness. Haha. Fu Wanqing shook his head. But what we think is reasonable, others may not think so. Meng Do agreed with this division, but Gue Do disagreed. They insist on taking 50% and don't care how the other 50% is divided. But the bottom line of Dream Capital is no less than 40%. Do Tianlu added helplessly. But Fu Wanqing and Do Tianlu both shook their heads. Hee. Sumo laughed. Of course he understood. Ghost Metropolis and Dream Metropolis actually wanted to squeeze Wangdu dry, but 20% was Wangdu's bottom line. What is the realm of the strongest cultivator in our Forgotten Capital City? Sumo asked. There are 3 great perfection soul transformation cultivators in Wangdu City. Fu Wanqing said. 3 great perfection soul transformation cultivators. Sumo nodded inwardly when she heard this. Although Wangdu was one of the 3 capitals of the southern region, it was actually a second-rate city on the chaotic gods' continent. There were 3 great perfection soul transformation cultivators in such a city. Compared to the White Bone mainland, the difference was like heaven and earth. One had to know that on the White Bone mainland, a great perfection soul transformation cultivator could sweep through everything. Unless one encountered 1 or 2 deity tribulation cultivators on the White Bone mainland. What about Mengdu and Guichan? Sumo asked again. Mengdu has at least 1 early deity tribulation cultivator, and Guichan has at least 2. Fu Wanqing looked at Do Tianlu, seemingly unsure. Brother Su, this is all an estimate. After all, the strength of each city is a secret, and no one will easily reveal it. However, the strength of Ghost Metropolis and Mingdu is definitely above Wangdu, Do Tianlu said. So, were we the ones who suggested a bet to determine the winner? Suemo laughed. We are ashamed. Fu Wanqing and Do Tianlu smiled bitterly at the same time. This was because this idea was proposed by the head shopkeeper of the Gold Gathering Inn. The management of Wangdu City was managed by the Council of Elders. There were a total of 7 people in the Council of Elders, and they were all soul transformation cultivators. At the same time, they had some prestige in Wangdu City. One of them was the head shopkeeper of the Gold Gathering Inn. On that day, the Council of Elders sent 3 people to negotiate with Mengdu and Guichan. The head shopkeeper of the Gold Gathering Inn said this out of anger. Because if they were to compete in techniques, Wangdu City did not need to compete at all. Which soul transformation cultivator could resist a deity tribulation? Gambling was a fair competition in the southern region of the chaotic gods continent. However, as soon as the words left his mouth, the head shopkeeper of the Gold Gathering Inn regretted it. Because there was a difference in cultivation level, even in gambling techniques, he could not win. It seemed fair, but in reality, it was still a competition of cultivation level. However, as soon as he said it, the representatives of the other 2 families agreed. It was impossible to take it back. Therefore, on that day, they agreed to bet against each other at the mine 3 months later, and the winner would be decided by 3 bet. If it was a draw, another round would be added. In any case, the winner would be decided by gambling. Whichever city won would be allocated according to that city's plan. Of course, Wangdu City's plan was still 20%. However, whether Guichan or Mengdu won, they would only have 10%. Therefore, Wangdu City was the only one at a disadvantage, because, in theory, it had no chance of winning. The 3 cities had merely turned a martial arts battle into a gambling match. This was also a good way to avoid casualties. After all, the 3 cities of the southern region had to jointly protect this mine and prevent other forces from interfering. What are we betting on? When are we betting? Suemo asked. The 3 cities will each come up with a gambling method, and the matches will be 1 round. This will only be known on that day. The cities will definitely come up with their most confident gambling method. The date will be 7 days later, Do Tianlu said. Brother Su, are you willing to help us? For many days we have always wanted a gambling expert, but unfortunately, we have not been able to find one, Fu Wanqing asked. Since we have met, both of you think highly of sumo. We are fated, and I am willing to give it a try. However, I cannot guarantee that I will win. Sumo had to leave some leeway in his words. This was his first time in the chaotic gods continent. If the other party had a tribulation god, then it was hard to say what would happen. This time, Sumo only wanted to see the power of the chaotic gods continent. All right. Fu Wanqing and Do Tianlu were overjoyed. If Sumo agreed, they would have a glimmer of hope. Otherwise, they would not have any hope at all. Brother Su, since you have agreed, we will immediately introduce you to the head shopkeeper and the elders of Wangdu City. The Elder Council had promised that if anyone could help Forgotten Capital City obtain the mining rights of the 10% Supreme Grade Spirit Stones, they would be given 1,000 Supreme Grade Spirit Stones first. At the same time, you will become an honorary elder of Wangdu City. You will not be involved in managing the city's affairs, but you will enjoy many privileges, Fu Wanqing and Do Tianlu said. They understood that although Sumo did not necessarily want these benefits, they had to give them. I'll listen to my 2 elder brothers' arrangements. Suemo smiled faintly. Chapter 240. 1 bet, 10% of the mine. It seemed like child's play, but it was actually a game between the 3 capitals of the southern region. Sumo naturally understood this, but he still agreed to the bet for Forgotten Capital City. Sumo didn't have to get involved in this mess. Of course, the reason in his heart was not simply that they were fated. Rather, he wanted to see the strength of the Chaos God's continent, especially the strength of the Ghost City. Behind the Ghost City, there might be a mysterious immortal sect, the Corpse-less sect, because in the jade slip that Guan Xiong gave him, there were 4 words marked on the location of the Ghost City. Ghost City without corpses. No corpses. Corpse-less sect? Sumo thought that there might be a connection between the two. According to the Mute Master, the Corpse-less sect wanted to control the White Bones, which forced the Holy Wheel Grandmaster to kill 20,000 members of the Slekton sect. For Sumo, the Corpse-less sect had a kind of don't give in feeling. He was a little curious and a little resentful. However, Sumo knew almost nothing about the Corpse-less sect. Therefore, Sumo agreed to the bet. Of course, Fu Wanqing and Do Tianlu were very happy and immediately brought Sumo to the Elders' Guild in Forgotten Capital City. The Elders' Guild was an ancient castle in Wang Capital City. It was only a few dozen li away from the Gold Gathering Inn. The 3 of them arrived in an instant. From afar, the ancient castle was dozens of feet tall, and it was completely built with gray stone block. Fu Wanqing and Do Tianlu had already sent a message saying that they had found a casino expert. Thus, as soon as they arrived at the castle, 2 cultivators with their attendants greeted them. They were 2 intermediate soul transformation realm cultivators. They were wearing golden robes, and the cultivator behind them was a nascent soul realm cultivator in a gray robe. Of the 2 soul transformation realm cultivators, one was stout and looked like a merchant, the other was thin and had a cold expression. Fu Wanqing and Do Tianlu quickly introduced Sumo. The one who looked like a rich merchant was the manager of the Gold Gathering Inn, Jean Mantang. Sumo snickered in her heart, as expected of the head shopkeeper of the Gold Gathering Inn, to actually have such a name. Could it be that he's a greedy person? The other soul transformation stage cultivator was called Huo Lingjun. In the Forgotten Capital, he came across a huge artifact shop. It was said that all kinds of magical treasures were sold inside. They were all members of Wangdu City's Elder Council. Sumo had met Jean Mantang and Huo Lingjun before. Jean Mantang had already received the message from his 2 subordinates and was currently beaming with joy. That was because he was the one who had blurted out the suggestion, so he had been under the greatest pressure during this period of time. "Welcome, Brother Su. Welcome." Jean Mantang addressed Sumo as his brother despite his status as a soul transformation realm cultivator. "Shopkeeper Jean, you're too kind." Sumo smiled calmly, without a trace of nervousness. This kind of temperament was not something an ordinary mid-nascent soul cultivator could possess. Everyone present nodded their heads in agreement. In Sumo's eyes, an intermediate stage soul transformation realm was not considered an expert. Everyone chatted as they entered the castle. Inside the castle, there were 5 cultivators waiting. The 4 men and 1 woman were all dressed in golden robes, and their cultivations were all at or above the intermediate stage of the soul transformation realm. Among them, there was an elder whose cultivation was at the Great Perfection soul transformation realm. This time, it was Jean Mantang who introduced Sumo one by one. The elder at the Great Perfection soul transformation realm was called Zhuge, and he was the great elder of the Elder Council. The other 3 male cultivators were all at the intermediate stage of the soul transformation realm, and they were Guo Lingyi, Fan Xingyun, and Kong Fangzi. The only female cultivator was at the late stage of the soul transformation realm, and her name was Lu Ru. Her figure was enchanting, and her beautiful eyes sparkled. She was an alchemy grandmaster. Among the 7 great elders of the Elder Council, other than Zhuge, the other 6 had rather large immortal properties in the city. They had medicine shops, magic weapons, formations, spirit stones, and other industries. This Elder Council could be said to have monopolized the main industries of the entire Wangdu city, and also controlled the operations of the entire city. They were the true controllers of Wangdu city. However, Sumo did not see the other two great perfection soul transformation realm cultivators. Presumably, those two almighty cultivators did not participate in the daily management, and instead focused on their cultivation. They would not appear unless there was a major event. Sumo greeted everyone one by one, and exchanged a few words with them. Everyone in the Elder Council was extremely polite to Sumo. This was because Do Tianlu's gambling skills could be said to be illustrious in the entire Huangdu city. For him to admit defeat, it was enough to show how powerful Sumo was. Zhuge Hong represented the Elder Council of Huangdu City, and once again reiterated, if Sumo could help them obtain the mining rights of the top-grade spirit stones, they would first give her 1,000 pieces of top-grade spirit stones. Then, she would directly become an honorary elder of Huangdu City, and enjoy the same privileges as them. Naturally, Sumo said a few humble words, and nodded in agreement. Thus, they arranged for all the members of the Elder Council, Fu Wanqing, Do Tianlu, and Sumo to go to that gambling house 7 days later. At the same time, they had decided, and Huangdu City's side set a dice gambling house. This was because Fu Wanqing and Do Tianlu had personally seen how powerful Sumo was, and felt that they had a higher chance of winning. Of course, Sumo did not care. At the same time, they also briefly introduced what kind of gambling house Mengdu and Ghost City might set up, who would gamble, and so on. Sumo noted them down one by one, and also had a rough idea in his heart. In the evening, the Elder Council set up a banquet, and everyone drank and chatted merrily, and became more familiar with each other. Then, accompanied by Jin Mantang, Fu Wanqing, and Do Tianlu, Sumo returned to the Jujin Inn to rest. This day, just like that, passed. In the guest room, Sumo was alone, sitting cross-legged on a cattail hassock. Early stage of deity's tribulation. Sumo first looked inside his Dan-si, and the unwithering chi flowed. Now that Sumo had advanced to the deity's tribulation, he had already begun to cultivate the third realm of the unwithering technique, unwithering soul. The chi did not wither, the bones did not wither, and the soul did not wither. The unwithering soul could help Sumo advance to a higher realm of the deity's tribulation. Sumo took out the red dust ancient fan and gently opened it. The unwithering soul's incantation was actually in his mind. Sigh. Sumo sighed softly. In fact, this sigh, he himself did not know what to sigh about. Sumo gently stroked the red pendant with his hand. The two words, red dust, slowly appeared. However, this time, it was not emitting a faint red light, but a purple light. It was really magical. At this time, Sumo did not know that it was actually the heart of white bone. Red dust. Sumo said to himself. However, he had never been able to figure out what these two words meant. At the same time, Sumo took out the Dust Sieve Sutra from the abode of the soul storing altar. Unfortunately, there was still not a word. Regarding this existence that was like a heavenly book with a total of 9 pages, Sumo only knew that it was made of the same material as the red dust ancient fan. Human skin, or the skin of a powerful cultivator. What was the Dust Sieve Sutra? Sumo did not understand. Humph. At this time, the little white pig crawled out, humming. Sumo understood that this guy must be hungry when he came out. Fortunately, now Sumo had a lot of elixirs. However, the little white pig's taste was already bad. What he ate now was basically the elixirs of the nascent soul level. At this time, if Fu Wanqing and Do Tianlu knew that their elixirs were treated the same as the pigs raised by Sumo, how would they feel? Foodie! Sumo laughed and scolded, giving Humph 3 elixirs. Then, she put away the red dust ancient fan and the Dust Sieve Sutra, and finally took out the soul-storing cauldron, which was the broken copper bowl. Chapter 241. 7 days later. The gates of Huangdu City opened. The elders of Huangdu City, led by Zhuge Hong, brought Sumo, Fu Wanqing, Do Tianlu, and the others to the mine at the center of the 3 capitals. Everyone rode on the wind, and there were many followers. It was as if a group of immortals had descended. In these 7 days, Sumo stayed in the Jujin Inn, concentrating on preparing. With the abilities of these soul transformation stage and nascent soul stage cultivators, even if they didn't use any powerful spells, it would only take them less than half an hour to reach the mineral deposit. Looking from afar, it was an empty valley, but there was smoke and a faint purple glow. Sumo narrowed her eyes, and with one look, she could see that there were treasures underground. It was indeed an extraordinary place. At this time, the valley was already guarded by the cultivators of the 3 cities. Once an agreement was reached, they would start mining. This mine was said to be enough for the 3 cities to use for 4,000 to 5,000 years. It was quite rich. When Sumo and the others arrived, the people of Mengdu City were already there. Zhuge Hong and the others went over to greet the elders of Mengdu City. Sumo just watched from behind, because he was a secret weapon, so it was not convenient for her to go forward. The elder of Mengdu City was a middle-aged cultivator in embroidered clothes. He was also at the Great Perfection Soul Transformation Realm, and his aura was not ordinary. The 3 capitals of the southern region actually had a good relationship with each other. Otherwise, they wouldn't have settled the dispute in such a peaceful way. The cultivators of Wangdu City and Mengdu City also greeted each other. In less than a quarter of an hour, close to 100 cultivators flew over from the southwest. They were the people of Mengdu City. However, the Mengdu cultivators' wind manipulation technique was different from the Wangdu and Mengdu cultivators. That was because there seemed to be a faint layer of black gas under their feet. However, that layer of black gas was very faint. If one didn't pay attention, it was almost unnoticeable. Sumo didn't take it to heart. After all, each sect had their own secret techniques, so it wasn't surprising. Ha ha ha! The leader of the Mengdu City was an old cultivator. However, he was dressed in a black robe, was tall, had a full beard, and looked quite arrogant. Before he landed, his laughter could be heard. Fellow Taoist Zhuge, fellow Taoist Yu, sorry to keep you waiting. I'm late. Forgive me, forgive me. As he spoke, the Ghost City's cultivator landed on the ground. Fellow Taoist Old Ghost, how have you been? Zhuge Hong cupped his hands with a smile. Brother Old Ghost, long time no see. The great elder of Dream Capital, Yu Jiqing, also cupped his fists and bowed. Long time no see, how have you been? I trust you have been well since we last met, ha ha. Old Ghost laughed loudly, looking very enthusiastic and forthright. Sumo sneered in her heart, because this kind of people who looked forthright on the outside were often treacherous people. On the contrary, those who looked cold and indifferent were often kind-hearted. The first impression the old ghost gave Sumo was not good. The people of the 3 capitals exchanged pleasantries. At this moment, 3 people flew over from afar. As it turned out, for the sake of fairness, the 3 capitals had jointly invited 3 prestigious cultivators from the Azure Fushan Mountain in the southern region of the Chaotic Gods as witnesses. The 3 cultivators were He Yunzhang, He Yunxiao, and He Yunxing. They were blood brothers and were all at the great perfection of the soul transformation realm. Usually, the Azure Fushan Mountain and the 3 capitals had good relations. That was why the 3 of them were invited to be witnesses. Once the 3 of them arrived, they naturally exchanged pleasantries. At this moment, all parties had arrived. He Yunzhang looked at the great elder of the 3 capitals and said with a smile, "It's getting late, I think we should start the battle. First of all, I would like to invite all the elders to let your guests show themselves." The great elder of the 3 capitals nodded. Zhuge Hong nodded slightly at Sumo. Sumo smiled and walked a few steps forward into the arena. Then, Sumo cupped her hands at everyone present. "I am Sumo, today I will fight for the forgotten capital city." Sumo? The people of Dream Capital and Ghost Capital looked at Sumo and frowned slightly. Mid-stage nascent soul cultivators were a dime a dozen in the southern region of the Chaotic Gods. Was there no one else in the forgotten capital city? Why would they send a mid-stage nascent soul cultivator to participate in the bet? If they were to send a nascent soul cultivator, they would recommend Do Tianlu from the Gathering Gold Inn. How could such a mid-stage nascent soul cultivator win? However, this sumo looked unfamiliar. Could it be that she was an expert invited by the forgotten capital city and had some ability? The people of Dream Capital and Ghost Capital had their own thoughts. However, overall, they were somewhat disdainful of the forgotten capital city sending a mid-stage nascent soul cultivator to gamble. Then, an old cultivator walked out from the Dream Capital City's group. His hair was white and he had a goatee. His body was slightly hunched and he was as thin as a stick. Cough, cough, cough. Cough, cough. The old cultivator was still coughing like a sickly person. However, when the sickly old man appeared, the people of the forgotten capital and ghost capital's expressions changed. Thousand Hands sickly immortal, Zhong Budi. Do Tianlu couldn't help but gasp. This was because the Thousand Hands sickly immortal was an immortal of gambling. His gambling skills were well known in the Southern Territory. It was said that his original name wasn't Budi, but because he had been gambling for thousands of years and comprehended Tao through gambling, he changed his name to Budi. Zhong Budi implied that he wouldn't lose a single bet in his life. Zhong Budi was a late-stage soul transformation cultivator and wasn't from the Dream Capital. However, since he was willing to gamble for the Dream Capital must have not only paid a huge price but also needed a lot of faith. Otherwise, they definitely wouldn't be able to invite this immortal of gambling. The forgotten capital city had also thought of inviting him, but they really didn't have any connections. Zhong Budi? At this moment, not only were the people of the forgotten capital shocked, but the people of the ghost capital also had a slight change in expression. This was because they were afraid that if the Dream Capital won the bet, they would propose a plan to occupy 50% of the mine. And from the looks of the fact that the other party invited Zhong Budi, this possibility wasn't impossible. Ha! Old sickly immortal, why are you here? Listen to me and quickly go back. The ghost capital's old ghost laughed. How much did Yu Jiqing give you? I, the old ghost, will pay you double. You are here, why are you still gambling? Not to mention the small third capital, even in the entire Chaotic Gods southern region, who can win against you? The old ghost's words were half true and half false. He seemed to be forthright, but in reality, he was mocking Zhong Budi. He. Cough, cough, cough. Zhong Budi rolled his eyes and looked at the old ghost. Damned old ghost, this sickly old man took someone's money to eliminate disasters. Don't say anything. If you think highly of me, why didn't you find me earlier? I am actually willing to gamble for the ghost capital. What a pity. In a while, regardless of whether I win or lose, I still have to go to the ghost capital and ask for a cup of good wine from you. Zhong Budi wasn't at a disadvantage with his words. Ha ha ha, everyone laughed along. However, the moment Dream Capital's Thousand Hands sickly immortal Zhong Budi appeared, the atmosphere changed. Because he was an immortal of gambling. It was a form of intimidation. Well said. When the time comes, I will make you, this sickly old man, die. Ha ha, the old ghost said. At the same time, the old ghost waved his hand, and a cultivator quietly walked out from behind him. That cultivator wore a purple robe, a purple cloak, and a purple hood on his head. His entire body was covered up, and it was impossible to see his face clearly. However, looking at his figure, he was actually a female cultivator. A female cultivator. A female gambler. Chapter 242. As soon as the purple-robed female cultivator appeared, everyone was taken aback. Because they had never heard of any female cultivator in the Chaotic Gods southern region who was good at gambling. However, since she was willing to gamble for Ghost Capital, she was definitely not an ordinary person. Not to mention anything else, that Ghost City's old ghost was definitely an extremely shrewd person. He would definitely not arrange for an ordinary female cultivator to participate in this gamble. After all, that city's top-grade spirit stone mine was not a joke. The cultivators of Wangdu and Mingdu all felt their hearts tighten. Zhuge Hong stole a glance at Sumo. Yu Jiqing also narrowed his eyes. At the same time, everyone carefully looked at the purple-robed female cultivator. Was that a soul-dissolving cultivator? Or what level of cultivator was she? Everyone present could not see through her cultivation level, because the purple cloak on her body was very strange. It should be a special magic treasure. It could conceal one's cultivation level and aura. At this moment, even Sumo frowned, because he actually could not see through the female cultivator. Whether it was her appearance or cultivation level, they were all hidden in the purple cloak. Hee. Old Ghost observed them and was slightly proud. Everyone, this is our Ghost Capital's gambler. Little brother Su, old sickly ghost, you must go easy on me later. I am Guiying, greet fellow cultivators and seniors. The purple-robed female cultivator bowed slightly, her voice was quite pleasant to the ear. However, after saying that, she did not say anything else. She was another strange person. At this moment, many chaotic gods, southern region cultivators had gathered around. The three cities' competition to determine the division of the mineral resources was considered to be quite a lively event. Therefore, it attracted many southern region cultivators, many of whom came from tens of thousands of miles away. Today, it could be considered a small gathering of southern region cultivators. The three gamblers stood in the field, each with different auras. Zhong Bufu had been famous for a long time. The purple-robed female cultivator was extremely mysterious. Only Sumo looked the most normal, but also the least special. At this moment, almost everyone thought that Wangdu City would lose without a doubt. Other than the people of Wangdu City, no one thought highly of Sumo. Green Floating Mountain Cultivator He Yunzhang spoke again. Since the three of you are ready, let us use the simplest method of drawing straws to determine the order of appearance. As He Yunzhang spoke, he opened his hand and 3 balls of light appeared in his palm. These 3 balls of light are divided into 2 types, A and B. 2 are A and 1 is B. The one who caught A would be the first to bet. Then, they would bet with the person who caught the second. The loser of the first round would have to bet first. The one who can win 2 rounds will be the winner. If all 3 cities win 1 round each, then we'll add another round. During the duel, both sides can choose an elder to bet on. If the 2 duels are tied, then the duel will be a draw. Similarly, another question was added to the bet. Do you understand? The rules were actually very simple, and there was a lot of room for improvement. Therefore, the 3 of them understood and did not have any objections. All right. He Yunzhang nodded slightly. With a flick of his hand, the 3 balls of light flew up. 3 balls of light DME 1B. Of course, everyone wanted to catch B, because then they could see the abilities of the other 2. Therefore, the moment He Yunzhang threw out the balls of light, Zhong Bufu made his move. The others did not see the old man do anything, they only saw his thumb and index finger pinch together. A ball of light was picked up by him. How could a soul transformation realm cultivator be ordinary? The female cultivator in purple waved her long sleeves and took the second ball of light. Only Sumo was the last, because there was only 1 ball of light left. There was no other way, because Sumo's cultivation was the lowest, she was at a disadvantage when it came to drawing straws. However, Sumo smiled calmly. The people of Forgotten Capital City could not help but frown slightly. Because the first to fight was at a disadvantage. Alright. Please crush the balls of light and see if it's A or B inside. He Yunzhang said with a faint smile. The 3 of them crushed the balls of light almost at the same time. However, in an instant the crowd was in an uproar. The female cultivator in purple covered her face, so her expression could not be seen. A dark glint flashed across Zhong Bufu's eyes. He had a bad feeling in his heart. This was because Zhong Bufu and the female cultivator both had the word A in their hands. Only Sumo had the word B in her hand, and a look of surprise flashed across Sumo's face. It seemed like he did not expect to fight in the second round. This result was somewhat unexpected. After all, Sumo was the last to draw straws. Although in theory the odds were the same for those who caught first and then caught second, the three of them were gambling experts, so they were naturally different. Sumo was the last to make a move? Thank you for letting me win. Sumo cupped her fists and smiled bitterly. Then the old man and this young lady will go first. In a while, we will spar with little brother Su. Zhong Bufu smiled insincerely. In his heart, he had already started to pay attention to Sumo. The female cultivator in purple did not say anything. Sumo took a few steps back, waiting to see how the two would bet. Young lady, what shall we bet? Zhong Bufu asked the female cultivator in purple. I'll leave the first round to you, senior. The female cultivator in purple said in a humble tone. Zhong Bufu could not help but laugh dryly. Since that's the case, I won't stand on ceremony. Let's compete in rolling dice for the first round. How about it? Rolling dice was the simplest and most common method of gambling. Zhong Bufu was a gambler, an immortal gambler who had been immersed in gambling for thousands of years. Naturally, he would use his most confident method for today's gamble. Dice, Seeing Zhong Bufu's choice, Dou Tianlu could not help but smile at Fu Wanqing. Back then, the two of them had personally witnessed Sumo's prowess. Of course, there were many ways to play with dice. However, they felt that Sumo was more confident in rolling dice. How do we play? Senior, please tell us. The female cultivator in purple said. Young lady, let's bet on guessing. 7 dice cups will be placed in 7 dice cups. We will shake the cups once, and the one who guesses correctly will win. If it's a draw, we will shake the cups again. The one who guesses correctly will win. How about it? 7 cups, each with 7 dice. Moreover, it was guessing. This level of difficulty surpassed what Sumo had played in the gold gathering in. It could be said to be a perverted level of gambling. When everyone heard this, they felt incredulous. Because it was impossible to guess. Dou Tianlu also frowned. The difficulty of 7 dice was many times higher than 3 dice. Sure. The female cultivator in purple nodded. Sumo was at the side, calm and unruffled. This was because no matter how many dice were added, the difficulty was the same to her. Zhong Bufu waved his hand and someone brought out a tray. On the tray there were a total of 9 shaking cups and 90 dice. The 3 witnesses had checked the shaking cups and dice to ensure that there were no mistakes. There were spare shaking cups and dice. Zhong Bufu gestured for her to start. However, the female cultivator in purple said, Senior, please go first. Zhong Bufu did not stand on ceremony. With a wave of his hand, he took out 7 shaking cups. At the same time, he pointed with his other hand, and the 49 dice entered one after another, landing directly in their respective cups. Ding ding dang dang. The shaking cups and dice were not made of ordinary materials. When the dice entered the cups, they gave off a crisp sound that was pleasing to the ear. Young lady, listen up, Zhong Bufu said. Then, Zhong Bufu's hand gesture changed. The 7 shaking cups danced up and down, sometimes like dragons swimming out of the sea, sometimes like strange pythons flipping their bodies. Ding ding dang dang, ding ding dang dang, the sounds were chaotic. Chapter 243. 7 shaking cups danced in the air. 49 dice clanked against each other. At that moment the entire place was silent. There were gambling experts among the cultivators of the 3 cities. They were all using their own methods to distinguish the number of dice. Dou Tianlu of the Forgotten Capital squinted his eyes, his ears twitching. However, his brows gradually furrowed, and the furrow became tighter and tighter. That was because, with 7 dice rolling, not to mention distinguishing the number, even distinguishing the size was extremely difficult. Finally, Do Tianlu let out a breath of turbid air. He gave up. This gamble was beyond his capabilities, unless he used his divine sense to peek at the shaking cup. However, he would be discovered immediately. No one would do such a stupid thing. Boom, hua. At that moment, Zhong Bufa's hands pressed down, and the 7 shaking cups landed on the long stone table. However, the moment they landed, there was no sound. Good, amazing. As expected of the 1,000-hand ailing immortal. Senior Zhong is indeed the gambling immortal of the southern region. The dice cups landed, and there was a flood of praises. Especially the cultivators of the dream capital, they praised him even more. However, Zhong Bufa's set was indeed eye-catching. The 1,000-hand ailing immortal lived up to his name. Little girl, please report your numbers. Zhong Bufu slightly straightened his body, stroking his white goatee, looking very confident. However, the female cultivator took a step forward, her steps calm. First cup, 2136511. Small. The voice of the ghostly figure was naturally pleasant to the ear. The 3 judges watched over everything, and did not find anything wrong with either side. Then, He Yunzhang waved his hand, personally opening the cup. 2136511. Small. The number of the 7 dice was exactly the same as the ghostly figure reported. Instantly, the entire place was filled with thunderous applause. Do Tianlu could not help but nod. That purple-clothed female cultivator was actually this powerful? However, Zhong Bufu only smiled faintly. Because he was not surprised that he guessed one correctly. If one could not even guess the number of the dice in one cup, then they were not fit to participate in today's gamble. On the other hand, Sumo's expression was even more indifferent, even somewhat indifferent. At this moment, the numbers of the 7 shaking cups appeared in his mind. When Phantom reported the number, Sumo, who had not opened the cup, knew that everything was correct. Second cup, 1 point, 1 point, 3 points, 4 points, 5 points, 2 points, 2 points. Small. Gue Ying reported the number of the second cup. He Yunzhang didn't say much and waved his hand. Whoosh, the whole place was in an uproar again. Because all of them were correct. The third cup, 123322222. Xiao. Gue Ying said again. He actually said Xiao 3 times in a row. He Yunzhang opened the third cup. Whoosh, the cheers this time were even louder than before. That was because the ghostly figure had hit the mark once again. At that moment, Do Tianlu felt a little dizzy. Because he definitely did not have that kind of ability. At most, he could listen to the count of 2 cups. 3 cups was impossible. The 3 great cultivators of Qingfu Mountain, He Yunzhang, He Yunxiao, and He Yunxing, couldn't help but nod. Even Zhong Bufu's eyes flashed with astonishment. This purple-clothed female cultivator was indeed powerful. Haha! Ghost Capital's old ghost laughed loudly, feeling proud of himself. The 4th cup, the 5th cup, the 6th cup, the ghostly figure counted 1 cup, and He Yunzhang opened another. Moreover, both of them were getting faster and faster. Everyone present was no longer cheering. Because they realized that there was nothing worth cheering about. After the 6th cup was opened, the whole place was silent. All 6 cups had hit the mark without a single mistake. Everyone in the 3 capitals and the cultivators of the chaotic gods' southern region were dumbfounded. How did that purple-clothed female cultivator do it? At this moment, even Zhong Bufu's expression was solemn. That was because he had remembered a point wrongly just now. The 7th cup. The purple-clothed ghostly figure paused slightly. The whole place was so quiet that only the sound of the wind could be heard. 6 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 6 o'clock. Xiao. Leopard points? At this moment, Zhong Bufu's face tightened and he squinted his eyes. Sumo, on the other hand, nodded slightly with a faint smile. Both of them knew that they had gotten it right again. Open! He Yunzhang shouted and waved his sleeve. The lid of the seventh cup flew up. Hua, the cultivators who had been silent for a long time, suddenly burst into thunderous applause. Because the 7 shiny white dice were neatly placed on the stone table. Each of them had 6 points facing up, and they were as red as beans. The ghostly figure counted it right again, and this time, it was exactly the same. Ha ha! Old Ghost was the first to laugh. How is it? Old sickly ghost, you've met your match. The people of the Dream Capital's expression slightly darkened. Of course, it was still impossible to determine the winner, but the female cultivator named Ghostly Shadow displayed strength that was comparable to the Thousand Hands' sickly immortal. Zhong Bufu's expression was not good. Although he still had a chance, he knew that he was the one who shook the cup in the previous round, so he had the initiative. Senior, is it my turn? The ghostly figure asked. He. That's right. Zhong Bufu forced a smile and nodded his head. He Yunzhang also nodded his head. When they looked again, the ghostly figure did not move at all. However, the 7 shaking cups suddenly flew up, and the 49 dice also fell into the shaking cups like before. Ding ding dang dang. Originally, everyone thought that the female cultivator Ghostly Shadow would act like the Thousand Hands' sickly immortal, shaking the dice cups and dancing up and down like an immortal. However, that did not happen. The 7 cups only moved in the air 3 times up, 3 times down, 3 times left, and 3 times right. The pattern was extremely monotonous. The most important thing was that the ghostly figure did not make any sound when she shook the cup. The shaking of the cups was silent. This ultimate skill instantly shocked everyone present. This was because the majority of people who gambled on the dice relied on sound to distinguish the rolling of the dice, and then calculate the number of dice. However, the ghostly figure shook the cups silently. What should they do? In that instant, Zhong Bufu's expression changed. To be honest, he had never seen such an opponent before. With just a few simple movements, the 7 dice cups landed on the stone table, and again, there was no sound. This time, none of the cultivators present dared to make another move. Senior Zhong, please, the ghostly figure said. Zhong Bufu was momentarily speechless. This was because he did not have any confidence at all. Just now, he had only heard the sound of the dice entering the cup. According to the ghostly figure's hand gestures, he could only make a simple judgment. The first clock. 3 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 1 o'clock, 4 o'clock. Big. However, Zhong Bufu was an immortal of gambling after all. After pondering for a moment, he still gave the numbers. Everyone present was waiting for the dice cups to be opened. He Yunzhang did not say anything else and directly waved his hand. Open 3 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 1 o'clock, 5 o'clock. Big. Iwu, sounds of astonishment and disappointment could be heard. This was because no one had expected Zhong Bufu to make a mistake in the first cup. Although he had guessed the size correctly, he had reported the number of dice incorrectly. Do Tianlu could not help but suck in a breath of cold air. This was because he already greatly admired Zhong Bufu. If it were him, he would probably not even get the size right, much less the number of dice incorrectly. The moment the dice cups were opened, Zhong Bufu's face turned slightly pale. He could not remember the last time he had lost. 2,000 years ago? Or 3,000 years ago? Senior, you have lost this round. The ghostly figure's tone was calm. There is no need to guess the other 6 cups. Zhong Bufu was speechless. Chapter 244. Thousand Hands' sickly immortal was defeated in 1 cup. This was a situation that no one present had expected. But it had happened. She had guessed wrongly in the first cup, so there was no need to guess the other 6 cup. Zhong Bufu laughed bitterly and cupped his fists at the purple-clothed ghost. Lady, you're amazing. I've lost this round. Zhong Bufu removed the word little from his address. Evidently, he did not dare to underestimate her anymore. However, he did not know what the ghost would bet on for the second round. At this moment, Sumo took 2 steps forward. Sumo looked at Gui Ying and He Yunzhang, cupped his fists slightly and said, "Since Senior Zhong is no longer guessing, then let's go. Since Senior Zhong has stopped guessing, why don't I try and see if I can guess the remaining 6 cups correctly?" "Sure," the ghost answered. Her answer was straightforward. He Yunzhang hesitated. "Little brother Su, of course you can do that. However, this cannot be considered a bet. No matter if it's right or wrong, it cannot determine the victor between the 2 of you." "Understood." Sumo nodded. At this moment, the people of the 3 cities were discussing. Thousand Hands' sickly immortal did not guess correctly. Can this nascent soul intermediate stage do it? I don't think so. That purple-clothed female cultivator shook the cup soundlessly, and her movements were simple. It's too abnormal. It's hard to say. Since Wangdu City invited him, and he took the initiative to announce the number of point. If he can't, wouldn't he be humiliating himself? Yes, that Sumo might not be famous. While everyone was discussing, the people of the 3 cities were waiting for Sumo to announce the number of point. Although it did not determine the victor, whether Sumo was right or wrong could directly reflect the difference in strength between them. The second cup, 1 point, 2 points, 1 point, 4 points, 3 points, 3 points, 6 points. Small. Sumo said calmly. He Yunzhang waved his hand lightly. Open. Once the cup was opened, everyone applauded. That was because Sumo's results were all accurate. At that moment, the forgotten capital city's elders, Fu Wanqing and Dou Tianlu all smiled. In particular, Fu Wanqing and Dou Tianlu secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Sumo was recommended by them. If she was too bad, it would be hard for them to explain. At this moment, Sumo had guessed 1 cup correctly. At the very least, this meant that she was not inferior to Zhong Bufu, who was famous for gambling. The purple-robed ghost did not change at all. Zhong Bufu's expression turned even uglier, because it meant that he was actually inferior to the mid-nascent soul stage wombing Sumo in this round. The third cup, 3 o'clock, 1 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 4 o'clock. Big. Sumo continued to count, and He Yunzhang continued to open the cup. The third cup was a complete success. At this moment, the scene was a little similar to the situation when Spirit Shadow was counting off, and there was no sound anymore. The 4th cup, the 5th cup, the 6th cup, the 7th cup, Sumo finished reporting one by one. He Yunzhang opened them one by one. Every hit without a single mistake. Whoosh, whoosh, at that moment, thunderous applause and cheers rang out once again. Especially the people of the forgotten capital city, their faces lit up with joy. That scene was truly shocking. Everyone felt that it was inconceivable. How did Sumo guess it correctly? The people of Dream Capital City had the ugliest expressions. The thousand-hand sickly immortal Zhong lived up to his reputation. In gambling, he could be said to be the #1 gambler in the southern region, but today, he was actually suppressed by 2 nameless people. At this moment, Zhong Bufu's expression was even uglier. He had a premonition that his lifetime of gambling fame was going to be buried today. However, he had already agreed to bet with Dream Capital City, so he had to finish the bet. Fellow Taoist Su, you're amazing. The purple-robed ghost actually commented. Sumo nodded in acknowledgement and did not say anything else. Following which, Sumo took 2 steps back and continued to watch the game. Miss, can you name the second round? Zhong Bufu was anxious to save his face. If he did not win the second round, He was afraid that his reputation as a gambling immortal would be gone. All right. The purple-robed ghost was neither too fast nor too slow. Then, he slowly said, Senior Zhong is known as the gambling immortal. I'm afraid that a normal bet would bring shame to Senior's reputation. Thus, today I specially prepared a different bet. Senior, please watch. As he spoke, the purple-robed ghost slightly waved his hand. Whoosh, a whoosh, the 7 shaking cups just now suddenly flew up. Then, they collided with each other in the void and separated from each other. All of a sudden, the 7 cups separated, each occupying a different position. Then they landed on the ground and sank straight into the ground. In an instant they disappeared. Then, the 70 to 40 dice flew up as well. Puff puff puff, puff puff. 7 horizontally and 7 vertically, they landed on the ground, forming exactly 49 dots. Each of the dice had a dot pointing up, which was quite beautiful. The ghost's series of actions were unfathomable. What was he betting on? However, Zhong Bufu was after all experienced and knowledgeable. From the beginning of the ghost's first action, he had been staring at the ghost's actions, as well as the 7 dice cups and the trajectory of the dice. A true gambler would coordinate his hands, eyes, heart, ears, and will, and finally, luck. Only then could he guess the winning bet. One had to admit that Zhong Bufu was top-notch in every aspect. However, he definitely did not have any luck today. Otherwise, he would not have met these 2 special people today. Everyone present looked on in a daze. The dice landed on the ground, as if they were rooted to the ground, and did not move at all. Only then did the ghost speak. Senior Zhong, this is my bet. Just now, I hid the 7 dice cups in the ground. They are under these 40 dice. As long as Senior can point them out one by one, it will be considered Senior's victory. If there is one less, it will be Junior's victory. Once the ghost said this, everyone present could not help but frown. Because this bet seemed to be too simple. 7 by 7, 49 positions to find the 7 dice cup. The probability seemed very high. Do Tianlu furrowed his brows. Even though he had taken a look just now, he seemed to be able to point out the positions of the 3 dice cup. Moreover, the 1,000-hand sickly immortal Zhong Bufu? At this moment, Sumo smiled coldly. Because he knew that everything was not as simple as it seemed. This bet would become more and more difficult as it progressed. However, even so, it was still a form of confusion. The real place was not here, and Zhong Bufu had already fallen into the trap. Oh! At this moment, Zhong Bufu's eyes narrowed. Of course, he did not believe that the ghost would set such a simple bet for him. Having gambled for thousands of years, Zhong Bufu naturally understood that the simpler the bet, the deeper the trap. Miss, do you know the rules of the bet? Zhong Bufu asked. Senior, don't worry. Of course I know the rules. The moment the dice land on the ground, the bet is set. I will not do anything else. Everyone present can all be witnesses. Guiying said. If I go against the rules, I will admit defeat. Zhong Bufu then looked at the He brothers. Don't worry, Daoist Zhong. We brothers will definitely be fair. If there is even the slightest bit of injustice, we will take responsibility. He Yunzhang said. All right. Zhong Bufu nodded. This time, he was extremely cautious, because he could not afford to fail. However, Zhong Bufu did not immediately point out the dice cup under the dice. Instead, he slowly walked 3 rounds around the 40-odd dice. At this moment, many cultivators present were somewhat anxious. This was because they felt that there was definitely a dice cup under the dice. They did not understand why Zhong Bufu was hesitating. Chapter 245. Illusion. Zhong Bufu's heart shook. After all, adding illusions to bets was something that was recognized in the chaotic gods' continent. However, it had been a long time since he had encountered such a gamble. Firstly, there were very few cultivators who could set up illusion techniques in the gambling house. Secondly, there were very few who could use illusion techniques in front of Zhong Bufu. He, Zhong Bufu, could see through ordinary illusions with a glance. They were completely ineffective. However, today's wager had caused Zhong Bufu's world to spin. Ding ding dang dang. Ding ding dang dang dang. Zhong Bufu circled the area 3 times, but his thoughts were still unclear. Instead, the sound of the dice cups colliding echoed in his mind. At the same time, countless red dots swayed in front of his eyes. The 49 red dots were like red stars that filled the sky, shining brightly. Zhong Bufu cursed inwardly. He already understood. It turned out that when Gue Ying raised the dice cup, he had already lured him into the game. Phantom knew that he was in a hurry to win and would definitely pay attention to his every move. At that moment, he had already laid down an illusion. The more Zhong Bufu clung to the bet, the more he couldn't see things clearly. All of this was within Gue Ying's calculations. However, as expected of the gambling immortal, Zhong Bufu immediately adjusted his state of mind. Zhong Bufu closed his eyes. He looked like he was in deep thought, but in reality, he was chanting a calming technique to get rid of the interference of the illusion. After a long while, the clanking sounds finally disappeared. The countless red dots finally turned into 49. Amazing! Zhong Bufu thought to himself. At this moment, he had almost no confidence in identifying the 7 dice cup. However, he still relied on his own experience and concentrated for a moment to determine Qi Gu's position. Then, Zhong Bufu tapped the first die on the northeast corner. A ray of white light shot out from his fingertip and hit the red heart of the die. Many of the cultivators there frowned. Do Tianlu of Forgotten Capital City was one of them, because he had seen it clearly just now. There was definitely no dice cup under the first die in the northeast corner. Of all the people present, only Su Mo nodded slightly. This was because there was indeed a dice cup hidden under the dice. Fellow Taoist please verify it. Zhong Bufu said slowly. All right. He Yunzhang pointed with one hand. The die flew up and a red light appeared in He Yunzhang's hand. Chi chi chi. The red light drilled into the ground, reaching 3 feet in an instant. However, there was nothing under the dice. There was no dice cup at all. Ah! Oh, almost everyone present let out a sigh of regret at the same time. This was because none of them understood why Zhong Bufu would choose to stand under a dice cup that could not possibly have a dice cup. AI. Do Tianlu let out a long sigh. However, Zhong Bufu and Sumo were the most shocked at that moment. The two of them couldn't help but look at each other. They saw each other's shock, because both of them believed that there should be a dice cup under the dice. Then, Zhong Bufu's face turned pale. He turned to look at He Yunzhang and said, Taoist He, you were monitoring everything just now. Are there no abnormalities? He Yunzhang was startled by Zhong Bufu's question and couldn't help but turn to look at his 2 younger brothers. He Yunxiao and He Yunxing raised their eyebrows. Taoist Zhong, what do you mean? Do you not trust our Qingfu mountain? He Yunxing said unhappily, everything was normal just now. There was no problem at all. He. Zhong Bufu laughed bitterly and cupped his fists at Madame He. Since that's the case, I apologize for being rude. With that, Zhong Bufu sighed at Gue Ying. I've dominated the gambling scene for thousands of years. My horizons have been broadened today. If I'm not wrong, you used the flower grafting tree, pursuing shadow technique that has been lost for tens of thousands of years. Am I right? Senior Zhong is indeed knowledgeable. Gue Ying nodded. Flower grafting tree, pursuing shadow? What technique was that? Everyone present, including Sumo, had never heard of it before. However, from Zhong Bufu's words, one could tell that it was a gambling technique. Zhong Bufu shook his head in self-mockery. Flower grafting tree, pursuing shadow. To lose to this technique, This old man is sincerely convinced and has no regret. However, I have a request. I wonder if you can reveal your true appearance and let me see you? Senior Zhong, I cannot comply. The purple-robed figure said calmly. If you want to see my true appearance, you must defeat me. He. Zhong Bufu nodded and said self-mockingly, if I could defeat the flower grafting tree technique, I would have left the chaotic gods continent a long time ago. With that, Zhong Bufu cupped his fists at the dream capital's great elder Yu Jiqing. Taoist Yu, I have failed you. I am truly sorry. Then, he cupped his fists at the surrounding chaotic gods continent cultivators. Everyone, I, Zhong Bufu, am known as the gambling immortal. However, I am not as good as you today and I accept my defeat. Today I, Zhong Bufu, announce that I will retire from gambling. From now on, the chaotic gods continent will only be poor and sickly people, not the gambling immortal. I shall take my leave. After saying that, Zhong Bufu's body turned slightly and he disappeared. Wah, the crowd was in an uproar. Actually, the moment Zhong Bufu appeared, many people thought that this gamble had lost its meaning. After all, Zhong Bufu was the gambling immortal. However, the previous 2 rounds had shocked everyone and left them in disbelief. This was because Zhong Bufu had lost, and he had lost miserably. From now on, the chaotic gods continent would only be poor and sickly people, not the gambling immortal. Today's gamble had forced Zhong Bufu to retire? This was something that no one had expected. Everyone's faces were filled with astonishment. Who exactly was that ghostly figure? The Mengdu's side did not expect such an outcome. Before this, they had thought that this gamble was in the bag. In order to persuade Zhong Bufu, they had expended a lot of resources. However, it had been to no avail. Yu Jiqing sighed deeply. He had a good relationship with Zhong Bufu, and he understood Zhong Bufu's temperament very well. If there was even the slightest chance of winning, Zhong Bufu would not have acted this way. Retire from gambling. Zhong Bufu did not even bother competing with sumo because he knew that it was meaningless. The appearance of the purple-robed ghostly figure was a crushing existence. Ha ha ha! At this moment, the happiest person was none other than the ghost capital's old ghost. The old man laughed heartily without any scruples. He actually said to Sumo, "Little brother Su, I wonder if you still want to compete?" Since Zhong Bufu had admitted defeat and left, he felt that there was no need for Sumo to compete. In fact, this was also the thought of a portion of the cultivators present. Although Sumo had shown his skills earlier, no one was optimistic about him. Why not? Sumo looked at Old Ghost and sneered. "Senior, are you afraid?" "I'm afraid?" Old Ghost could not help but sneer when he heard Sumo's unfriendly tone. "Little brother Su, my ghost city has never been afraid of anything." "Is that so?" Sumo stared at Old Ghost and smiled. "In that case, I have a new request. Is Ghost City afraid?" "What request?" Old Ghost asked. "Raise the stakes." Sumo's words were powerful. Chapter 246. Additional Stakes. Once Sumo's words left her mouth, everyone was shocked. Was this green-clothed nascent soul intermediate stage crazy? Even the thousand-hand ailing immortal Zhong Bufu lost and retired from gambling. That purple-clothed ghostly figure displayed his overwhelming ability. At this moment, Sumo actually requested for additional stakes? At that moment, even the people of Wangdu City could not understand it. The elders of Wangdu City could not help but look at Great Elder Zhuge Hong. And that Great Elder Zhuge Hong displayed the demeanor of a great elder at this moment. Zhuge Hong's expression was calm, and there was nothing out of the ordinary. He did not even respond to the gazes of the other elders, but faced everything in the field calmly. Fu Wanqing and Dou Tianlu exchanged glances. 1. They were worried that Sumo would say something crazy, and 2. They admired Great Elder's steadiness. At this moment, No one knew that Zhuge Hong's heart was in turmoil, and he had started to curse. Additional stakes? Suemo, your F** king insane. What additional stakes? We just need to keep the 20% of the mineral resources. Of course, Zhuge Hong only cursed in his heart. But on the surface, he was extremely calm. At this moment, he displayed the skills of a spirit transformation full circle. Additional stakes? Old Ghost was stunned. However, he immediately looked at the people of Huangdu City, and from their expressions, he immediately determined that this was an impromptu idea. However, Zhuge Hong's calm and collected demeanor made him a little suspicious. Additional stakes? How? Old Ghost sneered. If I win, Huangdu City wants 50% of the mineral resources. Sumo looked at Old Ghost. Whoosh, in an instant, the entire field almost exploded. Just now, in order to appear calm and cover up his nervousness, Zhuge Hong picked up a cup of tea and took a sip. Puff! Once he heard Sumo's words, he actually spurted out the tea. Cough cough. Zhuge Hong immediately realized that he had lost his composure. This tea, it's too hot, too hot. A spirit transformation full circle said that a cup of tea that had been cold for almost 2 hours was too hot. Who was he trying to fool? Ha ha ha. Hearing Sumo's words, Old Ghost actually looked up to the sky and laughed. Sumo, are you crazy? Let's not talk about the fact that you might not win the bet. Even if you win, you can ask the Forgotten Capital City if they dare to ask for 50% of this ore. Old Ghost's words were filled with threats. Because this was indeed the case. Forgotten Capital City was the weakest of the 3 cities. There was not a single deity tribulation cultivator in Forgotten Capital City. Originally, they had only asked for 20%. If they were given 50%, they might not be able to defend it. Elder Gui, since I, Sumo, dared to bet, Huangdu City naturally dares to win. Sumo smiled. Ha ha! At this time, the great elder of the Dream Capital, Yu Jiqing, also sneered. Sumo's bet was equivalent to snatching the shares of Ghost Capital and Dream Capital. What if you can't win? Old Ghost coldly asked. If we can't win, of course Forgotten Capital City doesn't want 10%. This ore can be divided between the 2 cities. Forget Capital City will back out. Sumo's words were resolute and decisive. Sumo, do you think you can be the ruler of Huangdu City? Old Ghost looked at Sumo with disdain, then looked at the elders of Huangdu City. At this time, the elders of Huangdu City all had different expressions. Only Zhuge Hong regained his composure. With one hand holding the teacup and the other holding the lid, he gently blew on the cold tea with a faint smile on his face. The highest realm of acting tough was nothing more than this. Cough cough. Great Elder! Great Elder! Jean Mantang, who was beside him, reminded. Oh? What's the matter? Zhuge Hong acted as if he was suddenly enlightened, as if all his attention was on drinking tea. This caused the surrounding people to be speechless. Great Elder, Sumo wants to increase the bet. If he wins, we will get 50% of the ore. However, if he loses, we will back out and no longer want the ore. Jean Mantang could only repeat himself. Oh! Zhuge Hong nodded lightly. Brother Su, please make the decision for such a small matter. Everything will be decided by Brother Su. Such a small matter? The people of Huangdu City all felt that their great elder's act was a little too much. 10% to 20% of the supreme spiritual stone mine was enough for Huangdu City to consume for thousands of years. This was a small matter? Then Huangdu City would probably have nothing to worry about. This time, he had given Su Mo enough face. But in reality, Zhuge Hong had already thought everything through. This was because if Sumo lost, Huangdu City would at most get 10% of the ore. If Sumo won, Huangdu City would get 50% of the ore. Comparing, it wasn't hard to make a decision. Although it was risky, what wasn't risky? In the infinite worlds, there was almost no such thing as profit without risk. This time, Zhuge Hong had placed all his bets on Sumo. As for confidence, he didn't have it. However, this was a gamble. At the same time, Zhuge Hong faintly felt that Sumo wasn't a normal intermediate nascent soul. Because a normal intermediate nascent soul wouldn't dare to raise the stakes at this time. Unless he didn't want to live anymore. One must know that if Sumo won, he would have Wangdu City's support. But if he lost, could he guarantee that Wangdu City would let him go? If he really was an intermediate nascent soul, there were hundreds and thousands of people in Wangdu City who could kill him. So, there was only one conclusion. No matter who won or lost, Sumo wasn't afraid. And how could someone who wasn't afraid of Wangdu City and Wangdu City casually raise the stakes? So, Sumo's victory was definitely a high probability event. These thoughts were all within Zhuge Hong's consideration. He looked casual, but he had already weighed everything. Hee. Hearing Zhuge Hong's words, Old Ghost laughed coldly. Old Ghost had always been cunning and proud of his intelligence. Everything that happened just now was seen by him. He mistakenly thought that everything was discussed before by Wangdu City. Zhuge Hong and the other elders were just putting on an act, trying to deceive him. Wangdu City was ambitious, but this Sumo was just an intermediate nascent soul cultivator. Did she really have the ability to win against Gui Ying? At this moment, Sumo looked at Zhuge Hong and praised him in her heart. It seemed like Zhuge Hong was not ordinary to be able to become the great elder of Wangdu City. Zhuge Hong's support for Sumo was very important. Senior Old Ghost, then can you be the master of Wangdu and Mingdu? Sumo countered. Huh. Old Ghost hesitated. He actually looked at Gui Ying. If I win, Wangdu City and Mingdu will get 640. If I lose, Wangdu City and Mingdu will get 320. How about that? Gui Ying's words were directed at Yu Jiqing of Mingdu City. It was obvious that he agreed to Sumo's bet. Hee. Yu Jiqing laughed helplessly. Now, Zhong Bufu had already backed out. He could only choose to agree. Mingdu City no longer had the initiative. Sure. Yu Jiqing nodded. I hope that Lady Gui Ying wins. Whoosh, the spectating chaotic gods cultivators were in an uproar again. Bet. This time, the gambling became even more exciting. Chapter 247. The three cities came to an agreement. At this moment, Sumo smiled at the He brothers of Green Fushan Mountain. Seniors, I'll have to trouble you to bear witness later. The He brothers nodded slightly. In the end, they actually raised the stakes. The stakes weren't small at all. They did not expect this. However, there was no problem if the three sides agreed. Miss, how do we bet? Sumo asked Phantom Shadow. Same rule, one person per round. If it's a draw, we'll add another round and discuss the rules. How about it? Phantom Shadow said. As you say, Miss, Sumo replied. Miss, please make the first bet. The bet is here. There's no need to make another bet. Phantom Shadow said. Just now, Senior Zhong only guessed once and missed. There are 48 dice left. Fellow Taoist Su, if you can find the 7 dice cups, you've won this round. Once Phantom Shadow said this, the crowd began to discuss again. There's still a need for this round? Sigh. Looks like that flower grafting tree, shadow following won't be easy to break. Otherwise, why would we use the old game? Of course it won't be easy. Can it force the 1,000-hand ailing immortal away? Hee. I think that Sumo is in trouble. The cultivators in Chaotic God Domain discussed. Most of them were not optimistic about Sumo. The cultivators in Ghost Capital and Dream Capital, however, were full of confidence. The cultivators in Forgotten Capital, on the other hand, looked nervous. Sumo laughed. Miss, this round doesn't have an illusion. Aren't you at a disadvantage? Illusion? The cultivators present were shocked. So there was an illusion hidden in that seemingly normal bet? No wonder Zhong Bufu fell just now. A bet is a bet on luck. How can a mere illusion decide everything? Fellow Taoist Su, try to break this round. Don't worry, Phantom Shadow said. Sumo laughed, but she did not agree to the bet immediately. Sumo walked closer to the bet. At this moment, only one dice in the northeast corner was dug 3 feet deep. The other dice did not move at all. Sumo frowned slightly. Although he and Zhong Bufu had determined that there was a dice cup in the northeast corner, it was fortunate that Zhong Bufu was the one who gambled, not Sumo. This was tantamount to Su Mo having a chance to correct himself. The first mistake was definitely due to the wrong method of calculation. Therefore, this time, Sumo reevaluated everything. Furthermore, Zhong Bufu's failure just now had given Su Mo the best example and inspiration. In fact, Sumo was certain that the moment Zhong Buying hit the die in the northeast corner, a figure suddenly appeared. There was a dice cup under the dice. However, the moment He-Yun raised the dice cup, the position of the cup changed. All of this was reflected in Sumo's spiritual platform. However, Sumo was sure that it wasn't Phantom's doing or He-Yun-Zhang's doing. Instead, it was the dice cup's automatic movement. This was completely in line with the rules of the bet. At that moment, Sumo recalled that before setting up the bet, Phantom had raised the dice cup and collided it with each other. It seemed like that process wasn't just part of the illusion. It was also the key to the later part of the bet. All the dice cups used that collision to establish a connection with each other. Therefore, to be precise, what Phantom had set up was no longer a simple bet. Instead, it was a mysterious formation. It was like a shadow following a flower on a tree. If Zhong Bufu missed the position of the dice cup, it would be fine. However, if he did, the moment the dice cup was opened, the dice cup that he had guessed would move to the position of the other dice cup. Meanwhile, the 7 dice cups were still moving around. Therefore, this was a bet that could not be guessed correctly. An illusion that was set up in a bet contained a formation. Sumo's interest in the purple-clothed Phantom increased. This mysterious woman was very powerful. If Sumo wasn't a deity tribulation cultivator and didn't have many inheritances of the Windwheel lineage, she wouldn't have been able to see through all this. Since she had seen through it, Sumo naturally had a way to solve it. However, Sumo had to make a request. Since Miss has said so, then we'll use this bet as a bet. However, I have a request. I hope Senior he can forgive me. Sumo looked at He-Yun-Zhang and said, "Oh." He-Yun-Zhang smiled. "Brother Su, what is it that you need my forgiveness for?" "I want to open the cup myself," Sumo said. He-Yun-Zhang frowned. "Brother Su, do you not trust me?" Sumo bowed. "Senior He, please don't blame me. It's not that I don't trust you, but the key to winning this bet lies in the opening of the cup. I have to open the cup myself to determine the winner. Therefore, please forgive me, Senior, and please supervise me." Sumo wouldn't dare to cheat. Sumo's attitude was very sincere. Hearing this, He-Yun-Zhang nodded. "Good. Then Brother Su will open the cup yourself. However, if you break the rules, I'll deal with it fairly." "Thank you, Senior." Sumo smiled. Then, he said to the Phantom, "Miss, I'm afraid I'll have the honor of seeing your true appearance today." "Not necessarily," the Phantom said calmly. Sumo smiled but didn't say anything. Then, Sumo turned around and faced the bet with narrowed eyes. To be honest, this bet was definitely not easy to win. Otherwise, he wouldn't have forced Zhong Bufu to retreat. Even if Sumo could see through the bet, he still needed the ability to solve it. Sumo was very cautious, because once he lost a round, it would be even more difficult to win it back. He looked at the bet for a long time. The entire place was silent. Since Sumo wanted to open the cup herself, then the result would be clear when he made his move. Therefore, everyone was waiting for Sumo to make her move. The ghostly figure was dressed in a purple robe and stood quietly not far away. The wind seemed to be unable to move her purple robe. She was like a lifeless statue. Looking at Sumo, he stared at her for a long time. Suddenly, the corners of his mouth curled up. At that moment, the positions of the 7 dice cups were all in his mind. The hardest part of this round was actually opening the cup. If it were anyone else, they might not be able to open the cup. However, Sumo was different. Looking again, Sumo formed a seal with both hands. Her fingertips emitted wisps of light. Everyone, close your eyes. Sumo, it's time to pull out the radish. Sumo joked. Although she was joking, Sumo's hands did not slow down. Suddenly, 7 rays of light shot out from Sumo's fingertip. The 7 rays of light shot toward the 7 dice on the ground like silk threads. 7 dice cups opened at the same time? The spectating cultivators did not expect Sumo to open the cup like that. They could not help but be slightly stunned. At that moment, the 7 dice cups were in different positions in the minds of the cultivators. No one knew if Sumo's choice was correct. They could only wait and see. Whoosh, whoosh. Looking again, Sumo really looked like she was pulling out a radish. The 7 dice flew up, and the 7 dice cups followed suit. Everything happened in an instant. Sumo's speed was too fast. Not a single mistake. Ding ding dang dang. The dice cups actually collided in the air. This was because Sumo's speed was too fast. It was a kind of inertia of the formation. The key to breaking the bet was to open the cups at the same time and not give them a chance to connect. If the 7 cups were opened at the same time, none of them would be able to escape. Good! Good! The cultivators of Forgotten Capital City cheered. The cultivators of Chaotic God State also applauded. This scene was too exciting. Especially the bet that even Zhong Bufu could not break. It made Sumo even more extraordinary. The body of the ghostly figure under the purple robe slightly shook. White bone skeleton technique. She did not expect Sumo to know a puppet technique. One should know that the only technique that could break her, flower grafting technique, was the white bone skeleton technique. Who are you? You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.